Good evening, and welcome to tonight's meeting, our first fiscal year 27 budget hearing of the Boston School Committee. I'm Chairperson Jerry Robinson. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Because this is a remote meeting, I will ask Ms. Parvex to please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Alkins, Ms. Knorr, Mr. Peralta,
Yes.
Ms. Polanco Garcia,
Yes.
Ms. Garrett,
Yes.
Ms. Torres,
Yes.
Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Parvex. We will begin tonight with the budget hearing. During the budget hearing, as is the precedent, public comment will take place after the budget presentation. We will then transition to a brief school committee meeting where there will be another period of public comment. The agenda, which provides more detail, is posted at bostonpublicschools.org/school committee under the February 12th meeting room. Tonight's session is being shared live on Zoom. It will be posted on the school committee webpage and on YouTube. Tonight's meeting documents are posted on the committee's webpage, bostonpublicschools.org/school committee, under the February 12th meeting link. The meeting documents have been translated into all of the major BPS languages. Any translations that are not ready prior to the start of the meeting will be posted as soon as they are finalized. The committee is pleased to offer live simultaneous interpretation in Spanish, Haitian Creole, Cape Verdean, Cantonese, Mandarin, Vietnamese, and American Sign Language. The Zoom interpretation feature has been activated. Zoom participants should click the globe icon at the bottom of your screen to select your language preference. I want to remind everyone to speak at a slower pace to assist our interpreters. On February 4th, Superintendent Skipper presented her preliminary fiscal year 2027 budget proposal to the committee. Tonight is an opportunity for the committee and the community to take a deeper dive into the proposal by focusing on school budgets. During our March 4th budget hearing, the committee will take a closer look at the central budget. In a moment, we'll invite Chief Financial Officer David Bloom and Budget Director Serena LaRocque to share their presentation. But first, I would like to invite the superintendent to give opening remarks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair, and good evening to our committee and also the public that's tuning in. So last week, we presented the district's preliminary $1.71 billion budget for fiscal year 27 and marked the official start of the annual school budget process. Chief Financial Officer David Bloom provided a review of where our budget stands today and our proposed spending plan for FY27. We're here tonight to provide you with a closer look at our budget planning for our schools. In a few minutes, Chief Bloom, Budget Director Serena LaRocque will give that presentation. Before I turn the meeting over to the team, I would like to recap last week's preliminary budget presentation and say a few words about our school-specific investments and how those decisions will affect our school communities. As we explained at the February 4th school committee meeting, the school's budget was developed over the past several months in close collaboration with our schools. The FY27 budget represents a 4.5% increase over FY26, which is roughly $74 million, thanks to the support of Mayor Michelle Wu. However, as we plan for FY27, we are confronting similar pressures to those we faced in FY26, even with continued historic investment by the city. Like school districts around our nation and the Commonwealth, our costs are increasing at a faster rate than our revenues. As we said in our presentation last week, 4 major areas are seeing a projected $86 million increase for FY27, some of which overlap with this year's overruns, including the rising costs of health insurance, of transportation, special education related services, and collective bargaining agreements. We are balancing these costs with an enrollment decline of approximately 3,000 students over 2 years, which will impact some schools more than others. Tonight, we will explain more specifically how these pressures and declining enrollment are impacting planning for our schools and classrooms. Even with these challenges, this budget supports important new investments, including inclusive education, bilingual programming, options for students with specialized needs, including alternative programs such as Mel King South End Academy. Shortly, the team will explain how our new funding formula, which we called, and you heard last week, Reimagining School Funding, will allow us to support these priorities in our schools. The formula, which will be continued to be phased in over the next 2 years, will better serve our schools by guaranteeing that they receive appropriate funding to meet their instructional needs and still have the flexibility to spend additional funds to the benefit of their school communities. We will support schools experiencing the greatest impact from the funding changes with transition funding as they adjust to the formula shift. Under the new formula, schools will fall into one of 5 scenarios based on enrollment. The majority of our schools will fall into one of 2 categories. Budget and enrollment changes are relatively small, or enrollment is declining and the school is experiencing a proportionate funding decline. The team will further illustrate the varying ways that reimagining funding will impact schools by walking through scenarios at 4 different schools: English High School, the Higginson K0 to 2, and the Tobin K to 8 school as it transitions to a pre-K to 6. As Chief Bloom explained last week, the overall impact of these changes on our budget is a reduction of over 500 positions in the coming fiscal year. More than 100 of these positions represent jobs that will not be filled or staff that will be reassigned. There will be 265 fewer teaching positions and 161 fewer para positions. Of those 426 positions, 218, so roughly a little more than half, are the result of school closures or grade reconfigurations in less than 10 schools. The reductions also include positions in the central office. This is the 3rd year of reductions to the central office budget and funding efficiencies in support of schools. We will review and explain these reductions at the next budget hearing focused on central office budget, which will take place on Wednesday, March 4th. In addition to the March 4th hearing, we will present our updated budget proposal based on feedback from committee and the community on Wednesday, March 18th. We will then come back to the committee to ask for your vote on the revised proposal on Wednesday, March 25th. The budget will then be sent to the Boston City Council for their review and appropriation. For those of you looking for more information, our budget docs are publicly available on the webpage, our website, bostonpublicschools.org. You can click on the FY27 Budget Development under About BPS tab at the top of the homepage, and that will bring you to our budget docs. I want to again acknowledge Chief Bloom, Deputy Chief Blair, Budget Director LaRoque, and the entire BPS finance team for their continued hard work and stewardship of this important process. So at this point, Chair, I will turn it over to Chief Bloom and the finance team for the presentation.
Thank you, Superintendent Skipper, and Thank you, Chair Robinson and the rest of the members of the committee for this opportunity to present tonight. Great. Sorry, bear with me for 1 second. Okay. Tonight's focus will be our proposals around school budgets for the FY26-27 school year. Before we dive into them in detail, I will give a quick overview of our budget for those members of the public who were not able to tune in last week. We will then dive deeper into investments and our new funding formula. Our budget director, Serena LaRock, will share some school examples, and we will close with next steps. Tonight is the second of 5 opportunities to engage with our budget in formal school committee sessions. After school vacation week on Wednesday, March the 4th, we'll be diving deeper into central budgets. After receiving feedback in these first 3 meetings, we'll submit a revised budget proposal and come back to this body for a final budget hearing to answer any remaining questions on March 18th. Finally, the school committee will vote on our revised proposal on March 25th. These hearings are the main public part of our process, but a lot of work goes into getting to this point. I'll talk a little bit later about our budget development process and the work we do with schools through the fall and early winter. Of course, we have our school committee process, but then afterwards, our budget goes to City Council for their review as a part of the mayor's proposed budget for the city as a whole. Before we dive into school budgets, I'm going to share some high-level details about our FY27 budget. The FY27 budget builds on years of investment by Mayor Wu and the broader community of Boston. Our FY27 proposed operating fund budget is $1.71 billion, a $74 million increase on our current year budget. We talked a little bit last week about our goals for this budget. In this hearing, we will focus on our reimagined school funding formula, as well as investments in our priority areas. As the superintendent mentioned, a key part of this budget situation is some significant cost growth on top of our typical inflationary increases. Health insurance costs are rising significantly, primarily due to an increase in rates and costs, and a little bit due to an increase in FTEs or full-time equivalents. We have rising transportation expenses that we're seeing in our current year budget that are moving forward to next year, as well as accelerating special education costs and the next year of implementation of our collective bargaining agreements. So with that summary of what we covered last week at a high level, let's dive in a little more to the school budget process. As I mentioned earlier, our school budget process starts all the way in October. In October, we take a snapshot of enrollment in the current year in order to work with that data, with our history of enrollment data, to make projections about our future year data, enrollment, excuse me. In early November, we give that information to school leaders to collect their feedback about anything we might have missed in our review of historical trends or about their unique school community. Our finance team also takes that data to do an initial review of school budgets and potential scenarios for the upcoming year, including areas of investment. By early December, we are ready to share preliminary budgets with school leaders. They review these for accuracy and questions with support from central staff and share their budget information with their school site council or governing boards for their feedback as well. In January, our school leaders come together with a large cross-functional group of central staff for a meeting called the Budget Collaborative, where representatives from finance, HR, the Office of Specialized Services, the Office of Multilingual Multicultural Education, their regional school superintendent meet with the school leader to review their student population, size, specific needs, and so on, and really to confirm the required staffing for the next school year, as well as the school's plan for discretionary spending. As we're doing now, right, our school budgets are finalized and reviewed by the school committee in February and March. And then it's important to note that as early as April, we are already starting to double check those assumptions we made in our school budget process. When we have assignment data from the first round of student assignments, and we have additional staffing available in reserve if something about student need has changed from what we proposed to you. Those reviews start in April and go all the way through the upcoming school year. So I mentioned a little bit about compliance in my previous comments. Our new funding formula is based on two main things. The first is this concept of required staffing or compliance. So some of this are things that are related to state and federal law, like required services for English learners or students with disabilities. Other things are district priorities or rules, such as requirements around social workers. But either way, every school gets a review and then a specific allocation to fully fund the staff required to serve students. In addition to that, schools get a per pupil allocation differentiated by need to create their flexible spending plan. Things that they are building to customize their school for their school community. I'm going to walk through some examples of these in a moment. For those of you who joined last week, I walked through some of the materials available on our website that the superintendent referenced earlier in a fairly quick fashion. Tonight, I'm going to take a moment to review some of those documents in more detail as we talk about our funding formula. So as the superintendent mentioned, we have an area on our website called FY27 Budget Development. As the superintendent shared, it's available through the About Us page on our main website. It is also available by going to bostonpublicschools.org/budget and clicking on this FY2027 Budget Development link. If you scroll down, you'll see materials from our budget hearings. So last week's materials contains all of our main budget documents. This week, we only have the supplemental material of our presentation. Section 4 is what we'll be reviewing in more detail tonight. These are our school allocations. 4A is an Excel spreadsheet that shows every rule that we allocate to schools in every school, so you can see every dollar that went out. 4C is a link to every school's individual school allocation folder. So if you have a question about one school, you can find it there. Where we're going to spend a little bit more time this evening is 4B, our list of funding rules. I can explain a little bit more about what I mean by compliance and flexible resources. So this document, which is available in multiple languages on our website for anyone in the public who wants to view, shows every rule in our new funding formula. These rules come in some main sections. I'm not going to go through every single rule in detail tonight because there are several, but I just want to orient people to the sections and what you'll see here. So the first group is administration. The second column you see is the name of the rule. So this is the principal rule. The rule itself is one principal for every school, and the funding use is restricted. What that means is a school cannot choose, you know what, I don't need a principal. I'm not going to budget for a principal. there's a restriction that they have to use that funding to budget for a principal. So then you'll see in administration, there are also rules around secretaries and second administrators at schools with multiple sites. We then move into a series of rules for elementary school teachers. These rules ensure that every classroom has a dedicated homeroom teacher, regardless of the type of teacher needed, as well as the specialist teachers who are teaching those special classes like art or music or PE. Once again, these funds are restricted in that you have to have a homeroom teacher, you have to offer specials, right? These are not choices, right? However, it doesn't mean there isn't some choice in the restriction. For specials, for example, while we require a certain amount of PE for every student, there's a lot of flexibility between dance or theater or music or other art or other classes at a school. For our secondary schools, there is a different fundamental method of funding. Schools are still allocated teaching staff, but they're allocated by period for a 6-period schedule to ensure that there's a sufficient staff to meet the needs of students. We choose an assumption of a 6-period schedule with teachers teaching 4 of the 6 periods, because that is the most expensive version of our high school scheduling model. Schools with other schedules may be able to build those schedules with fewer teachers, but this is the most that a school would need. There are different ratios here based on the ratios of class size in our teacher contract. And the Muniz is called out in particular as our only dual language high school. They have a lower class size. I'm going to come back in a minute to a special slide just about our resource inclusion funding. You'll notice this is the one sort of different rule in this section, in that rather than a specific assignment of teachers or paraprofessionals, there's a dollar amount assigned, and the restriction has some flexibility. The next section of our rules assigns paraprofessionals to schools based on the needs of their classrooms. The following section provides non-instructional required staffing at various ratios laid out by district policy or collective bargaining agreements. The final section here has to do with flexible per pupil funding. These funds, you'll notice, are marked as discretionary. That means the school has full choice of how they spend the funding. Or they're marked as discretionary with guardrails. For example, supplies and materials funding is discretionary. We don't determine what types of supplies and materials to buy. But there are guardrails in that you can't use your supply budget to buy a contracted service or to buy additional staffing. You'll notice across these rules that some are even across schools and others are differentiated based on various determinations of student need. One final rule to note is there's a system of manual adjustments. These manual adjustments don't follow district-wide rules, but are added for particular reasons. So, for example, we have a pilot of a restorative justice program. This is not a district-wide rule, but an allocation to 3 schools and is made as a manual adjustment. For FY27, this section also includes transition funding as we move into our new funding formula. That number would be positive if a school is getting additional resources to support the transition, or negative if the school is having money held back so that we can ensure we have sufficient funding to support the schools in transition with negative budget implications. And Serena's going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So once again, these rules are all available on the website. And I just wanted to quickly go back and pick one school. I think given the amount of times she's asked me questions or given me feedback on our school budgets over the last few years, I'm going to pick on the Bradley, and the principal there, who does an excellent job of managing her budget and giving feedback. So she won't mind me picking her out special to show her school's budget. So you'll see here, different than what was in the rules document, this allocation one-pager for a school shows the things that are particular to the school. So they have their allocation for their principal. They only have one school building, so they have one secretary. Their enrollment has not met the threshold for a second secretary, so there's no additional allocation. They have 14 classrooms, so they have funding for 14 teachers, and so on. We want to be really clear with communities why the funding is there. So in combination with the rules document that I just shared, you can review these documents to understand a specific school. The last thing I want to share before I complete our presentation is just one change for this year that will be different next year. Because this is the first year of our formula, and this formula is fundamentally different than last year, we don't have a comparison between the Bradley's proposed budget for next year and their current school budget. This does make review of school budgets more difficult. Going forward, this document will have two columns for budget and FTE, one that shows the current year and one that shows the future year, so that the community can see the differences going forward. Member Torres, you're the first person on my screen. Can you give me a thumbs up if the presentation is visible? Okay, thank you so much. Sorry to pick on you. You were just the first box. Great. So I wanted to talk through some priority investments that are reflected in this formula. I mentioned I would come back to funding for inclusive education for students with disabilities. This is the unusual hybrid of our two clear categories of compliance funding and flexible funding. So even though this funding is clearly something that is required for compliance, right? Supports for students with disabilities is a clear legal obligation. We are not funding staffing. Instead, we are giving all of our schools a per pupil amount that we believe works for the vast majority of our schools. Schools then have the flexibility to build a budget for staffing that meets the needs of their student population in collaboration with their school communities and the Office of Specialized Services. For some schools, this means co-teaching. For some schools, this means paraprofessional support. And there's a wide range of options in between. Every school prepares a document called a service map that describes the needs of all the students in the building and compares those needs to the allocation of staffing to ensure there is sufficient staffing to meet the needs of students. You will notice that there are a couple of manual adjustments in that manual adjustments section where we identified a very small number of schools that had needs above this per pupil amount, and those schools got additional resources. One other important note. We have 3 day school programs in BPS for students with disabilities who cannot be served in a traditional school. The Carter School, the Melvin H. King Schools, and the Horace Mann School all receive something called program budgets. Rather than funding through RSF, they get allocations specifically designed to meet the unique needs of their students because those student needs are not serviced in other schools in the district. Our next area of investment is for dual language programming. Starting with the upcoming school year, the funding formula will guarantee paraprofessional support in all dual language classes in grades 1 and 2. Previously, this support had only been guaranteed through kindergarten and provided as needed with class sizes over 20 in grades 1 and 2. We believe this will help strategically support language acquisition through foundational literacy. We're also continuing our rollout of dual language programs. We have a new program opening at the Frederick in the fall, as well as continued rollout of programs at the Blackstone, Sarah Roberts, and Mather. There are also some new investments in costs related to dual language that are funded centrally through OMME, but the service and materials are experienced at the school. This includes procurement of curriculum and digital access to platforms, as well as professional development planned in collaboration with the school communities. One other note I want to make while I'm on this slide talking about bilingual education. There have been some questions about a reduction in bilingual staff reflected in our tables. I wanted to take a moment to highlight that reduction and talk a little bit about its sources. Our budget tables show a reduction of 110 FTE full-time equivalents of bilingual teachers. While that label says bilingual teacher, it doesn't actually mean that the teacher is bilingual. Instead, what it means is that the teacher works in a program that is primarily serving multilingual learners. As we have moved away from the old district definition of sheltered English immersion and in line with our state's definition, some of these positions have been recoded either to general education teachers or special education teachers to more accurately reflect their work. Of the 110 teacher positions that have been reduced in bilingual teachers, 33 of these positions have actually just been recoded to either general education or special education. In most cases, that teacher remains in their position. Of the remaining 77, those are positions that were reduced. The main areas of reduction are related to enrollment decline in multilingual learners. We will have 30 less ESL teachers across the district, 13 of the 30 coming from our schools that are closing, and 33 less teachers in SLIFE programs due to both declining enrollment and students exiting our SLIFE programs. Next, I want to talk a little bit about alternative education. These programs have been hit by our enrollment decline as a district as well. In response, we are identifying areas where we can reinvest in targeted ways to support student needs. To do this, we are adding alternative education programs for students with emotional impairments at ABCD University High and Gregory Eggleston. We're expanding the ages served at Boston Adult Technical Academy and Bonnet East to include 16 and 17-year-olds who are undercredited. And we have completed the conversion of Community Academy as a program instead of a school. Community Academy placements will now be temporary across 2 sites, working in combination with programming at Succeed Boston to provide a full continuum of services. Finally, before I hand it over to Serena, I want to mention the work we're doing to redesign the Melvin H. King schools. Enrollment in these schools has seen an over 75% decline over the past decade. This has presented us with an opportunity to redesign the programming at the school. As you know, this school serves our students in some of our highest needs students with disabilities in a special education day setting. These are students that are not able to be served in a traditional school. As I mentioned before, the school is not funded using Reimagined School funding, but rather a program budget designed to meet the needs of their students. As we focus on being an inclusive district that serves students in high-quality seats close to home, we're in need of fewer seats in this school as more students can stay in a traditional school environment. However, the work being done at this school remains of critical importance to some of our most vulnerable students. Our budget proposal includes a redesigned budget with a capacity to serve approximately 80 students. While this requires less positions and funding than the school has, it still represents a significant investment of 36 instructional staff, 12 social workers, and many more administrative and support staff for a total of 67 staff supporting the up to 80 students working in the redesign program. This program will focus on improved literacy growth as well as CTE programming and attendance. Longer term, BPS is committed to improving the physical environment of the Mel King schools and creating a broader spectrum of therapeutic environment. I'll now hand it over to our budget director, Serena LaRocque, to talk a little bit more about the examples of schools that are using our Reimagine School funding formula.
Thank you, David. So if we go to the next slide, we've spoken about 5 scenarios. So under the new formula, schools fall into one of these 5 scenarios, reflecting how enrollment and student needs are changing at each school. Many of our schools are more of in a straightforward situation where enrollment and budgets are changing roughly proportionately, and schools are adjusting their staffing to match the needs of their student populations. However, some scenarios are a little bit more complex. In scenario B, for example, schools may have stable or increasing enrollment, but are seeing budget decreases because they previously received a hold harmless funding or a special program agreement. And so as we move to the new funding formula, those schools are being asked to align with the new Reimagine School funding rules. Another example or another scenario in scenario D, schools are seeing increased funding because the new funding formula fully funds required compliance positions that were not previously covered. And so the largest number of schools are experiencing relatively small or straightforward adjustments. Today, we're going to really focus more on examples for scenarios A, B, and C. Over the past several years, we intentionally did not reduce school budgets in line with enrollment declines. Specifically, under the former weighted student funding system, we provided soft landings for schools experiencing enrollment declines to ensure those declines were consistent over time before making major adjustments. Later, during the pandemic, we also provided hold harmless funding to maintain stability for students and school communities, anticipating that some students may return. With the new Reimagine School funding system, we are returning to a formula-driven approach. However, we are not making that transition abruptly and spreading it out over a few years. Because this is a new funding formula, it'll take a few years to fully implement it across the district. And so during that transition, our priority is to ensure that no single school experiences changes that are overly disruptive to the student experience. We know that from past experience that is best practice. As a result, schools that are mostly impacted by funding changes will receive temporary transition funding. At the same time, we know our resources are finite, and we need to ensure that all schools are funded to meet student needs. So some schools with increased funding will have a portion of that increase held back temporarily to support the overall transition. This allows us to provide transition funding to schools facing deeper cuts due to enrollment declines, so we can move to the new formula in a more stable and equitable way over the next few years. It's important to note that these adjustments are designed to be short-term and will phase out over the next 2 years as the new formula is fully implemented. So next, let's take a look at 3 examples that show how the new formula works at specific schools in different scenarios. Scenario A, we're looking at English 7 through 12. So this slide shows how transition funding is being held. It's how transition funding is being used to support schools that are experiencing enrollment declines under the new formula. Using English as an example, they're projected to decline by about 13%. So under the formula alone, the school's budget would have decreased by about 10%, or roughly 1.5 million. After working with the school leader, the school community, and our central teams, we are proposing a smaller reduction. The school will receive about 230,000 in transition funding, which reduces the impact of the change. This transition support allows the school to maintain additional capacity during the adjustment period, including space for students who may enroll later on as part of the long-term facilities transition. Most of the reductions still reflect the lower enrollment and the changing student needs, but the transition funding helps make those adjustments more gradual and manageable. This example shows how we're using transition supports to protect the student experience while we move toward full implementation of the new funding formula. We're now going to go into our second example, where this slide highlights scenario B, a school's enrollment increasing, but the budget is decreasing. At the Higginson, enrollment is projected to rise slightly from this year to next year. However, under the new formula, the school's budget is proposed to decrease by about 7%. The primary reason for this is the end of the specialized hold harmless funding that the school received in prior years. That funding was based on historical conditions and not the school's current student population. Today, the number of students with disabilities and multilingual learners at the school has declined, which means fewer specialized positions are required to meet student needs. As a result, the proposed budget reflects the school's current enrollment and service requirements, including modest reductions in teaching and teacher and paraprofessional positions. This example shows how under the funding formula, budgets are aligned more closely with the actual student needs, even in cases where enrollment may be slightly increasing. Our final example, scenario C. This is where enrollment is declining, but the budget is increasing. And we'll look at the Tobin, where their enrollment is projected to decrease as the school transitions to pre-K through 6 as part of the grade reconfiguration. However, the school's budget is proposed to increase by about 10% under the new funding formula. This increase is driven by higher levels of student need, particularly an increase in students with disabilities and inclusive settings, as well as adjustments to ensure more equitable discretionary funding. This reflects the core goal of the funding formula, directing funding proportionately to student need rather than just enrollment. At the same time, not all of the new funding is being released immediately. Because we are managing a district-wide transition, a portion of the increase is being held back temporarily to support schools facing deeper reductions. That funding will be returned over the next 2 years if the school needs remains consistent. So this example shows both part of the transition, the formula directing more resources to schools with greater needs, and the district pacing some of those increases to ensure a stable and equitable implementation across all schools. So to close, we want to briefly walk through the remaining steps in the FY27 budget process. Earlier this month, we presented the overall proposed budget to the school committee. Tonight's hearing is focusing specifically on school budgets, the process, the formula, and key investments at the school level. In early March, we will return to present the central office budget in more detail. Later in March, the committee will hold the final budget review hearing, and on March 25th, the school committee is scheduled to vote on the FY27 budget. Throughout this process, we always encourage families, staff, and community members to review the materials on the district website that David shared earlier and continue sharing feedback. And with that, that concludes the overview of the FY27 school budgets. We appreciate the engagement for the school committee and our community throughout this process. And with that, I'd like to return it back to the chair for the committee questions.
Oops, thank you. I don't know what happened to my camera, but I'll try to fix it. Oh, there it goes. Sorry. Thank you for the presentation. And because this is a budget hearing, I want to pause here and open up to questions from the committee. Dr. Alkins?
Thank you for the presentation. And I appreciate the granular level that we're getting to see. And I think the comparison a little bit, at least with how you're looking at enrollment from year to year. So I just have a couple of questions. Um, and Chief Bluma, you noted earlier that the way in which discretionary spending will be able to happen is at the individual school level. And so you noted that this is being done in collaboration with the school leader, but also the school community. So I'm actually kind of curious as to how individual schools are doing this. I understand it's done through school site council in some places, but I am particularly curious on those schools that we know may not have as active school site council. So I'm wondering how community input was gathered at the individual school level.
Yes, really appreciate that question. The community engagement process is a key part of the budget review process at schools. And as you named, school site council is the main method that's we have designed to gather that feedback. Some schools will also be engaging with family council directly for feedback, or a PTA. I was actually just at the Curley's meeting last night. And so schools have their own sort of supplemental structures for that, but we really are reliant on well-functioning school site councils. So we work in collaboration with the Office of Family and Community Advancement to help get those councils set up. And from the finance perspective, we provide training about the budget and the budget process, including specifically this review of discretionary funding, which is a key part of the school site council process. By our contract with the Boston Teachers Union, the school site council actually has the decision-making authority over discretionary funding, including a choice of partners, right? And so it really is a key part of the process.
Thank you. And shifting just a little bit, um, as we're talking about the transition supports that schools will be able to receive, is there a more finite period of transition of what the transition supports are? I was just trying to understand that a little bit more.
Mhm. So the vast majority of our transition supports will end up being for 1 year. Because usually there is a specific reason why that support is being given. So for example, the Frederick School is getting transition support as they merge to keep a second family liaison for 1 year. So as the communities come together, both sets of families have a voice they're familiar with in the process. While they do need to go back to one liaison over time, we wanted to make sure that in that year of merger, they're getting that transition support. Ultimately, of course, they could decide to keep it with their discretionary funding, but we wanted to give them that transition support for 1 year. At the English, which was the example Serena shared earlier, it's also for 1 year, but in that case, it's because we have some uncertainty around their enrollment projections because of the long-term facilities plan. The English is often a highly chosen school, and so we will know more next fall. Either their enrollment will be higher than we expected, in which case their funding formula will go up and offset the need for transition funding, or their enrollment will stay as we projected, in which case they'll need to finish adjusting their budget to the new level. But in that case, it's only 1 year because we just need to get to the fall to know what's happening with that school. And so each situation is slightly different. The Henderson is getting some related to their transition to 912. Once again, that's 1 year for that reason. But the vast majority will be 1 year. The only cases where there might then be a second year are cases where the enrollment decline is both significant and persistent. So a school that's seeing a really significant decline and then a continued decline for FY28 may be eligible for a second year. But even then, I think it's going to be a pretty tight bar for that second year because we believe deeply in the equity of this system and we don't want to establish a culture of sort of supplemental funding. But that being said, if there is a really specific need for a second year, we have said we are definitely going to review that when we have that data next fall.
Thank you. And I mean, something that I think would also just be helpful for like the public, because I think you do a decent job going through the individual scenarios. Um, but something I think that would be beneficial is to show how this would have been just mathematically, how this would be different with a weighted student like formula in comparison, or just right alongside what reimagined school funding unlike formula would do, or what it's how it's changing
Mm.
in that sense. Would that, or would that not necessarily be a good perspective from?
I mean, it certainly is something we could look at. I think, and we did really consider it as we were thinking about the implementation this year. I think ultimately the reason we decided against it is that it had been so long since we had actually run the formula for real that it it would feel sort of um off. And then the other thing we were a little bit concerned about was just like a little bit of confusion about what was happening, right? Because we haven't run the actual formula, and what communities have seen the last couple of years is this sort of hold harmless funding level. They would then effectively have like three different things they were looking at. And so we decided for the slightly simpler approach. But I think to your point, it was something that we were very much on the fence about all fall as we were deciding how to roll this out.
No, thank you. That's certainly helpful context, and I think it's this just always in the spirit of just trying to make sure our families understand it as clearly as possible, like what the benefit is and for it. And then sort of my last question, which is really around trying to understand and reconcile. I'm thinking of a situation like having multilingual educators and ensuring that every school has a sufficient amount of multilingual educators. And so when we talk about compliance, it seems to me that there are just multiple scenarios unless schools are able to accomplish staffing through the discretionary funding, that they might not be in compliance with, say, something like the Garrity rule. So just could you just elaborate a little bit on that for me?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is one of our key areas of focus um, around it's both a combination of what are the positions you have and what's the budget you have, And then how do you use it? So one of the things our Office of Human Capital is really focused on is even though a position may not be coded as a bilingual position, it might just be a third grade teacher. We know there's a huge value in hiring a bilingual staff member into that role, right? Because you're going to be working with students and families who speak another language. And so our school communities, our hiring committees with support from HR are definitely working to try and make sure we're hiring a diverse range of staff into all positions in the district. Um, and I know every year there are sort of areas of priority where our HR team is looking really deeply to try and ensure we're hiring um, staff who reflect the students we serve.
Thank you. And
Ms. Polanco Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. En el slide número 14, dice que la fórmula de financiación garantiza para profesionales en las clases de lenguaje dual para apoyar estratégicamente la adquisición de idioma a través de la alfabetización fundamental. Dice en el slide 14. Ya. ¿Verdad?
Sorry, I'm not hearing the.
Slide
Okay,
number
so-
14
Okay, there you go. There you
says that it supports the. Repite, Rafa, por favor, que no
Sí,
estaba, acabo de conectar.
en resumen, el slide 14 establece que la fórmula de financiación garantiza la contratación de paraprofesionales para las clases de lenguaje dual.
So what it says, slide number 14, that the financial formula guarantees the hiring of paraprofessionals for the educational purposes.
Para la adquisición del idioma a través de la alfabetización fundamental.
For the acquisition of language, considering the basic and the fundamental literacy.
Entonces, mi pregunta es, esta financiamiento, ¿verdad? Esta forma garantiza instrucción académica estructurada en el idioma nativo,
So
porque
the
no,
question is if this particular formula guarantees the instruction in the native language, because, adelante, Rafa.
ajá, porque no lo veo así claro, o solo es apoyo para adquisición en inglés.
It is not very clear to me the way it is conveyed, or it applies only for the acquisition of English itself.
Yes. So I'll do my best with this one. And superintendent may take over for me. But in these schools, we're adding the paraprofessionals to provide additional support. But the expectation in all of our dual language schools is that academic instruction is happening in both English and the partner language. So in all of these programs, there's a division of, I think it's, I'm not gonna get the percentages right of the day, but a certain percent of the day would be in Spanish, or Haitian Creole, or Vietnamese, or so on. And then the rest of the day would be in English. But academic instruction is happening in both languages.
Yeah, and I would just add to that the hiring for these positions, Member Polanco Garcia, are going to be with the eye of making sure they are multilingual and in whatever the primary language is of that dual language. Yes.
Sí, porque es importante tener en cuenta lo que tanto tiempo hemos estado pidiendo, que es la instrucción en el idioma nativo, porque cuando... Ok, Juan.
It is very important. That is a conversation that we've been having for a long time, the instruction in the native language, because...
Hemos estado hablando de la importancia de implementar el idioma de la casa, el idioma nativo, para que nuestros estudiantes no pierdan su identidad cultural y puedan
We've,
traer esto.
mhm. We've been talking about the need and the importance of the implementation of the native language at home for the purpose of the students not losing this native language.
Ujú. Entonces, cuando hablamos de la alfabetización equitativa, al no ver como claramente que están incluyendo esta parte, por eso es mi pregunta.
Because you have to consider that if we are talking about equitable literacy, not seeing clearly that this part is being included, that is where my question is coming from.
Ujú. La segunda pregunta que tengo
Second question I would like to ask,
es con relación a la educación alternativa.
it is regarding alternative education.
Me resulta interesante, pero a la vez me preocupa.
It sounds to me very interesting the way it's proposed, but at the same time, it preoccupies me.
En la parte que me preocupa es saber cómo vamos a garantizar, asegurar que los estudiantes multilingües no sean desproporcionalmente canalizados hacia una educación alternativa por
So
falta de apoyo lingüístico.
what is concerning to me, it says, well, the guarantees of multilingualism. The what is very concerning to me is that the students that need that language acquisition are not properly channeled accordingly.
Para que ellos no sean la tasa de graduación en multilingüe la tasa de graduación son los estudiantes multilingües. Por tradición tenemos una baja tasa de graduación,
Mhm.
muchas veces no terminan, muchas veces están frustrados porque no están siendo atendidos en su idioma.
So you have to consider different factors here that traditional multilingual students have lower graduation rates. We have to consider the frustration that this causes, and sometimes they're not instructed in their own language.
Entonces, yo pienso que es un poquito como preocupante porque quizá lo estaríamos induciendo a una educación alternativa en
It
vez
is
de...
a little bit, little bit concerning to me because somehow we are challenging them or directing them into a or indirectly into an alternative education, the way I see it.
y pudiéramos fortalecer su educación, trayendo más recursos para ellos, los recursos que ellos necesitan para no llegar a lo alternativo, sino que de donde están puedan tener los recursos suficientes en su idioma para poder llegar a la graduación
So the hope is
y a mejores resultados.
so the hope is that the resources that are being provided to that they don't have to go through alternative education, that the resources being provided can guarantee better results in that particular population.
Ujú.
So 100%. I think we have been adding the newcomer programs into the high schools now for the last several years. So that is the first line is that we're developing that across the high schools. We have particular schools like Boston International, BINCA, which is in its mission to serve our newcomer and multilingual students, and they do an excellent job. And what we noticed was that there are students sometimes over age, they may be 16, 17, 18, who come in, they are a ninth grader, they want to work, they need different schedule, or they may have um, failed, a year or two and they're disengaged. We have been trying to build up for those students the ability to reach back out and to wrap arms around them and to give them additional options as we re-engage them in schools like Boston Adult Tech. So BADA is very specifically 18 and older, but we built a lot of resources up in BADA, and with everything going on federally, we are just not seeing the enrollment there. So, in conversation and collaboration with the leader and the staff, we are now going to open it up for those 16 and 17-year-olds who might need to have a different kind of schedule to work, or they might be interested in a particular career area that BADA does. So it's not for a lot of students, but it's expanding the age back. But if you are a multilingual learner at the high school level, all of our high schools should be serving you with the intent to graduate you. And for students that for a variety of reasons doesn't happen for, that's where alternative education or something like BINCA can be really helpful to giving them a diploma. Not lowering standards, increasing options.
Mm.
All right. Eso ayuda entonces. Thank you so much.
That is
Thank you.
very helpful. Thank you very much.
Ms. Torres? You're muted still.
Thank you, Chair, and
Thank
thank you for all of us that were listening to this presentation. I know that Chief David talked about the formula, the new formula, and how it's being used and trying to support all principals and everyone to use it in the best way. But one of the questions I have is about, today some of the community members that I know talked to me about the shifting of students from the transitional language into specific, and then taking out that off of the priority of Boston Public School and taking the shelter English. And they were wondering, like how, and all kids that are multilingual or need that second language support, we put into general ed with ESL teachers. For one of my question is, what process and structures are in place to ensure that these funds are spent specifically on the district's priority of inclusive programs and bilingual programming to support all these kids that really need?
Yeah. So I think for that in particular, we rely on our close partnership with the Office of Multilingual and Multicultural Education, who have two types of liaisons who work with each school. One is supporting instructional program design, and the other is supporting like compliance and sort of ensuring that student schedules and things are meeting the minutes that kids need. And so schools have that sort of 1-2 of support from the office on creating that design. When it comes then into budget season, they're doing reviews based on need and making adjustments to that. And they actually OMME, as they're called, keeps an actual tracker of every school's plan going into the year. So they make a plan in budget season. This is how we're going to be using these funds to support our multilingual learners. And then OMME actually goes to every school in the fall and makes sure it's happening. And if it's not happening, we have a follow-up conversation with the school to figure out why. Maybe needs changed. And if they changed, they might need additional resources. And we have reserves for that, right? But OMME is in constant review and support, ideally as a supportive partner first, but as an accountability partner as needed to ensure that these funds are used in the best interest of the students in the school.
My second question is around, I know that you talked about schools that reach out to know what to do. So I was wondering who supports the schools and the principals and anybody who's planning to ensure that these fundings are allocated to meet the needs of all students, general ed
Yeah.
students, students with disability and multilingual learners, and that the discussions around the resources needed to be effective.
Yeah. Soup, I'll take this from my perspective, but you might want to add more. From my perspective, this is the real benefit of the regional model we've shifted to. So every school has a dedicated cross-functional team led by a school superintendent. That school superintendent, I think on average, supports only 13 schools. And they are looking across all these different areas of program design to make sure that the school is making the most of their resources. They're also then deploying their liaisons from different offices in targeted ways to support different things. One school might not need any help with multilingual education. They've got it down, right? They have a really strong instructional team. Another school might have newer teachers and need more support. And so then when it comes to our budget meetings, the school superintendent is almost a co-facilitator. They're in every meeting, and they're the one who's really helping the school navigate this complicated situation of I've got the needs of my students, I've got the availability of my staff, I've got the required compliance rules and policies of the district, and that school superintendent is the sort of hub of making sure the school gets what they need and uses it in the best way possible to meet the needs of students.
Okay, and my last question is around
Member Torres, can I just add in just a couple of things to that? So, I think that is certainly the main layer of the support to start. But I think in a budget like this, in a process like this, the reality is there's going to be things that even the regional soup needs additional support or the liaisons need additional support. I think David and his team have done an excellent job with making availability so that as kinds of questions come up, we can determine, is this a pattern that we have to address across a group of schools, or is this singleton issues? And then it gets escalated as it needs to. Sometimes that may be to the chief of a particular department, like multilingual learn, like OMME or special education. Sometimes that's to above the budget liaison, to Serena or to David. But this has really been a problem solving 100% hands-on from everybody, knowing that there were some difficult decisions that really needed to be made at the school side. And to your very point, that the school would have the resources it needed to serve every student. So I think this has actually been a beautiful example where the regional model is the first level, but then it goes up. And sometimes sometimes that's also my getting involved in something to understand if something is more of a pattern, and then we have a decision point we need to make. So at this point, it's the decisions, the conversations, the creative thinking about different situations have been at all levels of the organization in support of the principals and the communities.
thank you. My last question is about, I know that we a lot of teachers and paraprofessionals need to be looking for jobs or will be looking for jobs. And last time we talked about some of them will be reassigned. And I was wondering, what is the procedure and method for rehiring all these teachers? Although they have to go through the process of, like applying for the jobs when they see it, being interviewed by the principal who's going to hire them, and doing a mini lesson to see if they fit the criteria for that school and what they're looking for.
So I'll start with that, David, if you want to chime in. But it's funny you say that, Member Torres, because one of the things we've been doing in the schools that are closing is actually having principals that have vacancies go to those schools and observe teachers actually doing lessons, right? Like as a way to make that match. I think this is Human Capital's full on board. They're doing lots of meetings with the school leaders. They're looking at the pattern across the district of the different areas and where we're seeing particular groups of teachers forming or particular amounts of paras. Sometimes that may be a seniority with a placement. Sometimes that may be that there's openings and the principal's running a process and we're making sure that principals are talking with each other. So if you have great provisionals that because the position's not there, they're going to lose, we want to make sure those great provisionals are kept in the system. That means lots of conversation among principals in the regional networks to talk about, hey, such and such wonderful teacher or wonderful para. I don't have a space this year, but that would, he or she would be wonderful to come on board. It's really that intentionality. We said from the start to the principals, this is a year we want to look from within. not go outside the system to start for hiring, but actually look within at the just the amazing educators that we have. So I think our hope is when we look at the data when all is said and done, we're going to see that most of the folks, if they didn't have a placement in one school, will actually find their why in another school.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peralta?
Thank you so much, Chair Robinson, and thank you, Superintendent and David and Serena for the presentation. I have two quick questions, but the first one I want to give you the reason behind what the background of why I'm asking this question is because if there is one thing that I would like to accomplish in my tenure as a member of this Boston Public School Committee is that it's a change in hearts and minds of the people still out there that think that bilingual education is a nice thing to have for the immigrant families. It is not. Bilingual education definitely is helping our immigrant students, but it's also something good and sought after for the native English speaking families too. I live this in my own family. I tried for 4 years to get my older daughter into the Hernandez School, which is 2 blocks from our house, 5 minutes walk. And the 4 years, we always, because it's the lottery, we never won. We always were placed on waiting list. And I don't know now, but at the time, I think there were like 15 families for every single seat in K1, K2. So I feel like we need to be moving in that direction of expanding those bilingual programs. And therefore, I mean, I dream with a time when we use the designation of multilingual learners for all our learners because they have the potential for it. I've seen it at the Sarah Greenwood when my kids go. I've seen these kids that were the classmates of my daughters, that they come from families where the parents are not fluent in Spanish. They may have 1 or 2 words in Spanish, and now they are talking to me in Spanish. They are bilingual and biliterate, and that is us. That is our bilingual programs that are doing this. So the question is, I know that David just said that it's not 105 bilingual positions that teachers is more like 77. It's still a very hard pill to swallow that we are losing this specialized position when we should be funding and expanding our capacity for these dual language immersion programs. And I hear you, Superintendent, what you are saying, that we are trying our best, but I honestly ask, what else can we do so we don't lose this specialized position to support bilingual classrooms?
So I think I don't know if Chief Gamir is on because I know she would love to talk about the efforts that we're doing, Member Peralta, just around exactly what you're saying, right? The expansion of bilingual programs throughout the district, particularly so that there's regional access, which to your point, there hasn't been, right? So that's meant less access for certain students. Oh, I see Chief Gamir. So I'll let her start with that, and then I think David and I can talk about the positional piece.
Please mute.
It's muted, Joelle.
Sorry. Thank you, Superintendent Skipper, and thank you, Member Peralta. Yes, definitely. There are a lot of families who were like you when you were looking to enroll your child at the Hernandez, because the Hernandez, for one point at the time in the district, was the only one. And we have increased more bilingual dual language options for families, where we have had the Hurley, and then we added the Greenwood but it still wasn't enough, right? Especially when you look at the demographics of our students across the district. The majority of our ML students are Spanish speakers, but then we have many other multilingual learner families who speak wonderful, a plethora of languages. So since Superintendent Skipper and I have come onto OHM, we have really looked at the landscape of how we can offer more bilingual programming, dual language programming for families. So when we look at the landscape, we want to ensure that when a family comes or goes to the Welcome Center, that they do have a dual language option. So currently, right now, when parents go in their cluster, there is at least one Spanish dual language option for them. And in addition, since then, we've added Haitian Creole, we've added Mandarin language access, we've added Vietnamese, and we're adding Cabo Verde and Criollo, which will be the first in the nation at the Frederick next year. And the Haitian Creole one is also the first in the nation. So at this point, we are at a point where we do have a footprint of dual language programming available for families. But in addition to that, we have an expansion that's going on. So, like at the Sarah Roberts, at the Blackstone, we started off this year with K1, and next year we'll expand to K2 all the way until we are a K through 6 offering, and hoping that many of the students would matriculate to the munis or whatever secondary options that they would like. Do we have um, are we meeting the needs of every family right now? No, I'm just going to be very honest with you. We have so many beautiful languages that are across the district, but we just don't have the capacity at this moment to offer dual language in every language that students speak. One, because we want to make sure we have the capacity to do it. Two, we need to ensure that when we create a program, because we don't want to say, oh, we used to have a program here and then it's no longer there. We want to ensure that it's sustainable. Also, we need to ensure that the teachers that we have do have the academic language, the instructional language to be able to instruct in that language so that the students are really, truly bilingual, biliterate, and would attain the seal of biliteracy. So there's a couple of challenges we have right now. One is really building up our teacher field of bilingual educators so that when we do have additional programs like heritage courses across the district that we would like to offer for other languages, that we're building up that pipeline. And we're constantly looking at the demographics of where families are, where the needs are. But we're really proud that we do have a group of dual language programs that are currently expanding every year. Like the Blackstone next year will have 2 K2 classrooms, and Sarah Roberts will have 2, in addition to that, in addition to all of the other programs that we currently have. And so, yeah, we are, constantly working with the community. We'll be reaching out even more to really determine where we can expand where we have the capacity to expand and where we can create sustainable programs. Thank you.
And then David, I think to Member
Yeah.
Peralta's other question about the actual positions and the coding piece, could you like give an example of a school and kind of what happened in that?
Sure, I can give an example. So, the Edison School in Brighton used to have what we used to call the BPS SEI multilingual program. So it was a classroom where all the English learners would be sort of separated into that classroom across multiple languages. And they would be taught by a homeroom teacher who may or may not have actually spoken that language, but who was coded as a bilingual teacher. Of the changes that we described this year, so the Edison is going to have 9 fewer teachers coded as bilingual this upcoming year, but they're actually only reducing one of those positions, right? Because a classroom is closing, and that's a real reduction. The other positions are being coded more appropriately as we close that program that isolated students in that separate classroom and move to a more ESL-based model at the Edison. So the teachers aren't even though there's 9 fewer teaching positions coded that way, only one of them has actually been reduced.
Thank you. Thank you for the explanation. And again, like, let's not think that we need to close classrooms, bilingual classrooms, because we are getting fewer immigrant students. We need to open more bilingual classrooms because it's not just for the bilingual, it's for also for the English-speaking families that are looking around and seeing this society being so diverse and wanting their kids to grow also multilingual. My last question is regarding the Reimagine school funding formula. I have questions about when you are considering positions that are for the entire school. For example, let's take as example the social workers. I think the require is that for every 400 students, the school needs to have a social worker. And that's mandatory. But what kind of flexibility there is? Because one school with 400 students, you can compare that school with another with the same number of students. But school A may have, 2% of the students are on house, and school B may be 20%, and school A may have 50% of people living in poverty. See, and the other school may have 90% of the families living in poverty. So I understand that we need to draw a line in somewhere, right? But what kind of flexibility you have for a specific school and the specific students they are serving?
Thank you so much for that question. So for that example, we actually differentiate that resource in 2 ways. First, the number of social workers are allocated based on the number of low-income students in the school, not the overall enrollment. So that means schools with more low-income students have a higher ratio of social workers per student. The second is that schools that serve particular populations of students with emotional impairment related disabilities get an additional allocation, as well as schools serving students with limited or interrupted formal education. I say this both to update you on the social worker allocation, but also to say more specifically that we are very open to differentiating any of these positions. And I think one of the places the committee can continue to give us feedback is ways that we should be differentiating or identifying different needs that should be supported across any type of position. And so as we build this formula together over the next few years, we can continue to adjust rules and also create new types of positions and allocations based on needs that you're seeing in the community.
Thank you. And I'm a man of few words. I never thought I was gonna run out of that clock, and I did, so I'm gonna shut up now.
Alrighty. Thank you. Before I call on you again, Ms. Blanco Garcia, I just want to check in with Mr. Tron. Did you have any questions at this time?
Not really. I just want to applaud the work of the finance team and the budget team. I think it's very clear, and I do appreciate the concerns that they put in, particularly across all different types of students. I, as other members, have concerns regarding bilingual programs, and I have been advocating for that for the last 8 years. Now we have members who are continuing advocating, and I appreciate the fact that it is still an issue at the front burner. And but I do see the care, the thoughtful allocations, this superintendent and the budget team in allocating equitably for everything, including bilingual programs. So without any questions, I just want to express my gratitude to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Ms. Polanco Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yo tengo una pregunta chiquita.
I have a small question.
Em, yo creo que antes de decir mi pregunta, tenemos que reconocer que el distrito y la forma como están utilizando el decir lenguaje dual y traer esta expansión del lenguaje dual es reconocible para ustedes, para el distrito educativo, para la gestión de la superintendente.
Um, yes, so I just wanted to mention that we have to recognize the way that we say the dual language program. ¿Puede repetir la última oración?
Sí, y que es interesante reconocer el empuje que está teniendo y el auge, lo que es hablar del lenguaje dual en Boston.
Yes, and I just wanted to say the way that it has been pushed, right, to have this conversation about the dual language in Boston, in the whole Boston area.
Y yo creo no, en parte lo debemos a las comunidades, a las familias que han estado siempre empujando y abogando por programas de lenguaje dual en las escuelas.
And I would say that this has to do, right? I believe with the communities that have been advocating, the families that have been advocating for these dual language programs.
Y por eso creo que la población que va a ser beneficiada o que está siendo beneficiada es solo un 10% y muchos lo sabemos, ¿verdad?
And also that's why I believe that the population that will be beneficiated, it's only about 10%.
Entonces, mi pregunta para ustedes es, ¿cómo podemos nosotros, qué línea de tiempo podemos presentar y decir cuándo vamos a seguir, cuál es el próximo paso? Porque agradecemos lo que están haciendo, pero queremos ver esos próximos pasos para que se pueda seguir expandiendo.
And my question is, what is the timeline, right? What is the timeline that we can share? What are the next steps? Because we are grateful for the work that is being done, but we just wanted to share on that.
Para que se pueda seguir expandiendo, porque
So that,
tenemos que pensar en ese 90% que se queda pendiente, que se quede esperando, se quede esperando, que está ilusionado con el idioma nativo y con continuar desenvolviéndose en doble lenguaje.
and yes, so that this program can continue to expand. And what about the 90%, right? The 90% that is remaining, that is hopeful to continue to learn the native language and also to continue to expand on their knowledge and on this language.
So Chief Gamir, do you want to just could you just share with Member Polanco Garcia and the public? You have 3 programs that have been approved for next year. Just sort of what those are, and then what is the timeline for rollout of the ones that were just approved?
Thanks, Soup. So the rollout for the programs that we have that were approved that started off this year, like at the Sarah Roberts and at Blackstone, we have K1 right now, and both will expand K through 6. So that means we have another 7 years of rolling out dual language programming for those schools. The Mather is still continuing to roll out. So we have 1 more year rolling out. Next year, when we start off with the Cabo Verde and Criollo program, that will be year 1, and it will take 8 years for it to roll out year by year so that we become K through 6. For the programs. I also want to say, Member Polanco, yes, it's very important that we do have multiple options for families in dual language programming, but also we have families have choice right now too. Is so many families do choose dual language program, but then there's some families who don't choose that. So we have to ensure that we provide choices for families. But even if we provide choices for families and a family chooses not to enroll a dual language program, as a district, we're still obligated to ensure that we provide language instruction for students in terms of for English language acquisition. But it's also important for us to honor the language and the assets that the students do bring and contribute. So that's also part of the work that we want to do to make sure that we have, culturally and linguistically sustaining practices at the schools, because students and families need to know that even though if they're not enrolled in a dual language program, that their child's culture, their family is being honored. So we see that with the curriculum embedded there. We see that in the classroom libraries that we have for families. So I just want to also just reiterate that families do have choice. And so just want to highlight, like at the Blackstone, really want to work with the community to ensure that we are filling the Blackstone. I think part of it is because it's fairly new, so not many families know about it. But families are registering for the Blackstone, but some families have not registered for the dual language program. And so we've actually gone, when we look at the home language surveys, we actually go back and ask families and say, hey, there is a dual language program for your K1 or your child that you're registering for K2 next year, that there's a Spanish dual language program. Would you like to enroll your child there? So some families say yes and some families say no. So at the end of the day, it's really about choice for families. But as a district, we want to ensure that our families have options.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Vice Chair Scarrett?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, BPS team, for the walkthrough and the illustrative examples. I have a few questions. First, though, just a comment that appreciate the responsiveness to themes that you'd heard that you baked into the presentation about concerns about specific reductions of teacher types, et cetera. And I'm just thinking about the structure of these hearings going forward and how it could be helpful to our questions to hear public comment on the front end so that we can respond. I do want to make clear for public comment today that we can still ask questions that relate to school budgets at the central office budget meeting next in a few weeks. But I just wanted to share that might want to be something that we consider in the future so that we can be continue to be as responsive to themes that come up in public comment. Also appreciate your slide that offers some clarification on the difference between transition funding, soft landings, and hold harmless funding. And I guess a two-part question extending from Dr. Alkin's train of questioning there. What you gave a couple of examples of what you imagine would be different a year from now, potentially, that might make a school readier to remove that transition funding than today. Is that generally true for the majority of schools who are receiving transition funding? And also, will there be potentially a new set of schools that will need it if they experience unexpected enrollment declines? And from where would that funding come? Because right now you're withholding money from schools that actually should be getting more. Once that's expended, what could occur then?
I really appreciate that. I think from what I have seen to date, I think there's at most probably 3 schools in situations that we would consider for a second year of funding for current transition issues because of the sort of persistent and complex nature of the change at that school. But ongoing, I think part of the need for transition funding was that our previous formula was not directly tied to enrollment. And so schools that were seeing enrollment adjustments were often dealing with uh, multiple things going on. So they both had an enrollment decline and they had um, uh, a hold harmless or something else going on. I think what this formula does relatively well is it removes funding in chunkier increments versus as smoothly as weighted student funding did. And so just to go into that, if a school loses 10 students of enrollment for next year, if they're in elementary school and it doesn't change anything about their compliance funding, that funding won't actually go down. It will change their discretion, but the per pupil amount of that is significantly smaller and more able to be managed with things like non-personnel. At the secondary level, this is more about sort of some key thresholds of enrollment size, where if a school goes from 550 students to 450 students, that would be a pretty significant budget change. But really, until you're at a place where you can remove an entire cohort of teachers across all the subject areas, their budgets will stay more flat. And so what I'm expecting to see for next year is while there will probably be another group of schools with a more significant reduction because of enrollment decline, we won't see as many schools that are having a change. I feel like the volume this year is due to a lot of the hold harmless and the legacy weighted student funding policy versus the mechanism of the funding formula going forward.
Mm-hmm. Appreciate the point that the new funding formula is really designed to protect against small differences in enrollment. That also can require greater investment, right, to keep things level. And as such, with the unexpected enrollment declines being more extensive than were projected, what does this do to the long-term facilities plan in terms of evaluating what our proper footprint would be in terms of the number of schools by 2030?
So I think we're looking at that right now, Member Scarrett, to assess, whether that actually changes the bottom line of the number of schools, and if so, at what grade spans. And I would expect that in the spring we would update school committee on that piece.
Appreciate that. Just maybe for a further conversation at that time about long-term facilities planning and enrollment. We know so much of enrollment declines are out of our control, but some of it is about choice. And just wondering, is there any budget thinking or capacity to make any plays to get students back to BPS at all? I get mailings a lot from folks trying to take my child from BPS and make other choices. Do we have those ability to contact families who've made other choices? What is our capacity to really try to capture the lion's share of Boston residents to choose BPS?
We do, and I think that that's something the recruitment team is talking about. I think we're seeing it in particular areas, like for instance, Madison has a pretty robust recruitment strategy going right now. So I think even the secondaries, for instance, they redid the profiles. We've got the school fairs. So I think we're really trying to think on all different levels about it. Um, it's interesting because some of our data isn't so much that students are leaving the BPS. I think it's we're seeing the enrollment hit in both in the multilingual learner population, specifically with the federal landscape, but then also the cohorts that it's just smaller cohorts coming up of the number of kids that people are having. So,
Yeah.
so it's going to make it even more competitive for everyone to make sure that every student sees themselves here. So, it's a good point, and I think it's definitely something that the teams are actively working on.
I'm sorry, you gave me a moment to talk about how much I love the BPS play groups for kids who are under school age. Both of my kids have done them, and they're just amazing. And I think that is a wonderful way of us engaging in the community for a free drop-in program at a school, getting to see what school is like in a BPS classroom, and the kids just have a blast. Gets them very excited to go to school. So, yeah.
Well, those are great strategies. I think continuing to think outside of the box as it does get more competitive for sure. Appreciate the information on the alternative education investments. with a specific question around what you shared about Mel King and the enrollment decline that's occurred over time to the current enrollment of 80. You also talked about investments into the school to make sure students are getting what they need. What's the ultimate enrollment vision approximately for Mel King?
So I think right now we're looking at somewhere between 100 and 125. That would be about it. Back when we did the spec of the design of a building upgrade, it was roughly for about 150. But we're seeing both cohorts smaller, EI, the number of students being referred with an EI disability less, and now that we're opening up BPS for a lot more access and choice for our students with emotional impairment, I think that the hope is that Mel King can serve as it's intended to the students that most need a therapeutic day setting, but that in other ways there's a least restrictive environment open and accessible to our other students. So I think we're looking at around 100 to 125.
Thank you. That's helpful. And extending on Member Polanco Garcia's question about alternative education and who it's serving, I think it would be great to have a spring update on alternative education where we can hear more about that, as well as the intersection of alt ed and mass core, as that's a big topic right now as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm just wondering, maybe this may be in the central office part of the outline next time, Chief Bloom, but summer programming funding, where does that fit in? It looks like, I believe it's an increase
Yes.
last year to this year. And why is that? And what does it entail?
Yes, it is a central budgeted option, but I won't make you wait for the answer. We are not actually seeing an increase in summer funding overall. What we are seeing is a change in the way we're budgeting for it. More specifically, we had been budgeting for a lot of programming using ESSER and then some other grant funding that is no longer able to support the size of the program we want to offer. So part of our budget this year is moving the funding for some of our summer work onto the general fund, a pretty significant sum, I should say. And so that is funding for existing programming versus an expansion of programming moving off of federal funding.
Okay, maybe this is something to double click into next time, but I know that during the fall presentation on summer programming, we had some questions about there's so much happening, but the quality and value and alignment to priorities. I mean, was there any decision to maybe stop some, prioritize others that are more impactful? That might be useful to hear at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I can just say quickly that this has actually been a main focus of most of the conversations about the summer we're coming into. I think on two sides. One is on the community-based programs through fifth quarter. I think in general, Boston After Schools collected some really powerful data, as well as we have in terms of impact of the programming on students, but also just how many students actually attend the program and what their attendance looks like, in addition to what they learn and how they begin the school year. So based on that data, we definitely are doing refinement on the Boston After School and Beyond, choosing to both discontinue certain partnerships and increase certain partnerships. And then very similarly with our own summer learning academies, we will be adding in very concrete literacy and math benchmarking for students, much like we used to do in the BPS, because you can have fun and learn. And so that is the mantra. So we're going to be, you'll be seeing a bit of a real revision, I think, of how we're approaching that, and also on the recruitment of students that could be most benefited by it.
Thank you. Almost done. Chief Bloom, appreciate the walk through the one pagers and how to read those. We're not necessarily able to see what was purchased with the discretionary funding. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Yes. And so as such, I think it would be helpful coming back to this one allocation of a guidance counselor for schools to know for secondary schools, for example, what post-secondary support for students, like with whom is it living, and are schools feeling like they have what they need in terms of advising and supporting students through transition to post-secondary. Also interested in whether school leaders feel like they have what they need at single administrator schools for folks who are not also is there someone else who's not teaching or a family liaison who's serving in at least some sort of support if a principal has to be away or in an emergency, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for all that feedback, and I know these are things that we'll definitely look into. Uh, If alongside the budget book information that you'll be receiving shortly, there will be some slightly more detailed information on every school's budget, but it's more of a breakdown on sort of like supplies versus contracts versus some different main categories of positions. Probably doesn't get into quite the level of detail you're thinking about there, but we can think about how to develop that in future years.
There is still so much decision making at the school level in terms
That's
of
right.
how to use, discretionary funding, that to get a full picture, it's sometimes difficult without that last piece. But thank you.
Just two quick things, Members Garrett. So I think one of the things that David and I have had a lot of conversations about is in the reimagining funding as it continues to roll out, really having eye around this issue of the single building admin, going forward. So I think you'll hear a lot more about that. I think the point on secondary is an excellent one. It's also complex because it gets into partnerships. Some schools are the beneficiary of partnerships like College Advising Corps, or they have a strong, with another college prep. So it's not even just all represented in the budget. Some of that is all in kind. But we will talk with CCLR and see if that office, because I know they capture a lot of this, is able to give a snapshot of the activities that are directly correlated to college and career.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. I'll turn it over to the chair. At a budget presentation in the future, would love to hear more about the approach to reserves. Heard mention of reserves today. Is the approach to hold more than in past years? Is the goal to use them by the end to make schools more whole? Would it be better if we held more? So reserves as a request for a deeper dive.
Yes, for sure. And I can just say as a quick intro that our reserve level for school positions is at a similar level to the current year budget.
Okay.
Great. Okay, thank you so much for your presentation. I have a few quick questions. I understand the formula, but how do we look at school performance and outcomes to understand the effectiveness of our budgeting and the allocations?
Chair, I think this is in a couple ways. I think, school leaders ground their work in outcome in their school quality plans. That is like the main doctrine that they're using. I think when they're building their budget as principals, we lean on that plan to really look at what are the areas that we're trying to improve on with student outcome. And so I think that's where in the regional model, the conversations with regional soups, with the liaisons, are around making the measures matter and making sure that they're funding things that are going to do that. So I think it is much more cohesive than it's usually, as when I was a principal, certainly, much more cohesive in that plan is a guide and the regional network is that support to make sure that school leaders are thinking directionally, with it. I think centrally it's the same thing. We've done zero sum budget the last 2 years very deliberately with the eye of how do you know that what you're choosing to fund is making the difference to students that you're intending it to, or to whatever audience, if it's staff development or whatnot. So that's been an exercise. It's building that muscle for sure with those that are decision makers within the budget, but it's a core principle within both the school-based budgets and the central budgets.
Yeah, but I also understand the issue of how staff are budgeted, and so you sort of get a more of a formulaic issue around the staffing in a particular school. So I'm wondering if you're looking at outcomes and stronger needs, does some of the discretionary money goes towards buying more staff or specific staff time? Or does the district sit with that school to figure out that they do need two additional paras or whatever, to sort of balance out the formula and the, focused need of a particular program?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is where these conversations definitely need to be individualized to a school experience. So, for example, our transformation schools work closely with our transformation support team as well as their school superintendent to build up their designs. I think one of the trickiest things about answering this question for you, right, every year, because sure, I can count on it, is um, separating out the impact of the level of funding from the impact of the use of the funding.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for us, what we're really part of what going back to a funding formula with consistent rules will help us do is be really clear that um, we don't think it's the level of funding. We'll keep evaluating this. We don't think it's the level of funding that's driving differences in outcomes as much as it is the way those funds are being used and implemented in the school and school community. And so we're working really closely on what are the restrictions that we can make universally, and then what are the supports we provide to schools to be able to meet those to meet their needs and make good decisions about the use of their funds.
Okay. I'm not quite sure that's the answer I'm looking for, but anyway, it's getting closer to it. All righty. Also, again, looking back at the issue around the loss of or the reduction of bilingual teachers, and the questions about overall how we're defining bilingual teachers. People who speak a second language is different than a person who has the abilities to teach in that language. Is that correct? Because there are some people who are able to speak and therefore add value to our students because of their ability to be bilingual. But then there is a subset of people who have the skill set to be able to teach directly in that language. And then we have a number of people who are called ESL teachers or bilingual who speak English only.
That's right.
Asked to
That's right.
teach children who need bilingual support. How do we evaluate the effectiveness of this very diverse teaching population against the outcomes of our students, and what is this telling us about what kind of educators do we need to be investing more in to get better overall outcomes for our students?
Yeah, I mean, I think so Chair, I think as we said, like up until 2 years ago, BPS wasn't tracking whether a staff member was multilingual or bilingual, right? They might be in a position, to your point, but they may be only speak English, or they may speak a language other than the primary language in a particular multilingual class. Remember, Polanco Garcia really pushed us on this issue and really pushed us to say we need to know like what percent of our staff is multilingual or bilingual, and we need to increase that every year. And so that's the reason why we've done a lot of recoding so that we can actually answer that question. Like we know 40% of the hires this year spoke a language other than English, right? So we could never answer that question before. So we've been doing a lot of correcting of the coding, which is what David's talking about, that these positions that are being moved from what was bilingual, because a person was in it, didn't mean they were bilingual. It didn't mean they were in a bilingual program. And it actually didn't mean that they actually spoke something other than English even. So now, however, in the coding we're doing, we can answer that question, and we know that when we have a person that's in a dual language, that person is, that teacher is bilingual certified. And we know, like, if that teacher gets displaced, we are displacing a bilingual teacher. We didn't know that before. So a bunch of this is cleaning it up and cleaning up the coding, as David was sort of talking about, from what was the old multilingual SEI to what is actually now dual language bilingual education within the BPS, with
Mhm.
a threshold and an expectation, and the actual way that we mark that individual, that staff member, is clear. That's how we know when Member Polanco Garcia says, well, how do you know that you're hiring more staff that are multilingual? We can say because we actually keep track of this now.
Do we and also know what percentage of teaching staff that we have in classrooms that may not be the strongest people to be able to be a bilingual teacher? And how does that impact the number of people that we're reducing? And how are we making sure we're not losing talent that we need?
So I think, our goal with our staff who are multilingual is to not lose them, right? That is the idea, is to Member Torres's point, like, if we know somebody has the asset of another language, we want to know that, so that in the placement of teachers and paraprofessionals, or all educators, or open positions, we're making sure that that asset of language is being reflected. Like, that's going to be an important piece of keeping our staff whole. Um, I think both Francis and Joelle would be really good to speak to this, just around the measure of, like, in a bilingual program, um, seeing that staff member as biliterate, what does effectiveness look like in that classroom? Those are all measures that OMME is working hard on right now, and certainly working in their PD across the bilingual and dual language pathways. But as to the broader whole staff, I couldn't give you that answer right now, Chair, but I do think we can ask Joelle and Francis to speak to that at the next meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I didn't know if Joelle wanted to say anything before I moved on. Go ahead.
Sure, Chair. I don't have the number. I can get the number for you, but I just wanted to just reiterate that, yes, we kind of have, as the superintendent was saying, we have, and you were saying as well too, when we think about it, sometimes we have like three categories of bilingual teachers. One, they're coded as bilingual, may not speak any. They don't have the language capacity. Then we have bilingual educators who don't have the instructional capacity, but they do, they speak, they can communicate with families and students. And then we have what is really considered a bilingual instructor. And for the state of Massachusetts through DESE, a bilingual instructor, they have the licensure in a content area. But in addition to that, they have the bilingual education endorsement. That gives proof or the certification that they are a bilingual educator. They have taken an exam to prove that they are bilingual and biliterate, and that they're able to teach. And they have the components of educating students to promote bilingualism. And so it is very important that we work on retaining especially these staff members. But the superintendent and everyone would say that for those educators, it's very important that we do retain them, but sometimes we may lose them because of seniority. As we're moving on. So yes, would love to work with OHR to ensure that we are retaining that, so that it is a true reflection of the students that we serve.
Great. Thank you. My last question is about the 3-day schools. And I was wondering what was the range of per pupil cost for those attending each of our schools. And I know they're each a little bit different. I know the Horace Mann. Also, there are some students who come to the Horace Mann who are outside of Boston. But I don't think that is true for either the Carter or for the Mel King. Is that correct? Those are both Boston specific day schools serving Boston
Yes.
only?
I'll have to, I can get that data for you very shortly, but I'll need maybe a day to pull it together for you. But the only exception to that is occasionally with the Carter, if a family, because of family circumstance, has to move outside the city,
And they've served.
then we would keep them in the school, even though they're not technically a Boston resident. But they're always a BPS student first. Um, the Horace Mann is the school that services students from outside the district, and yes, there are some students tuitioned in, and some services they provide as well, some additional services.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess also in that range, we don't talk about it here, but would also like to know again, how many students are we supporting who are in out of district placements? And as we look at the development of some of our other programs, particularly now for high school special needs or for kids with dyslexia or other, what's the potential or when could that potential be that we would be able to bring some of those students back into the district and at what costs? So just really some general questions about the overall cost of the highest needs of special education, those costs and those options.
Yeah. So Chair, we serve anywhere between 375 and 425. It goes back and forth as out of district, as students age out or graduate or come into the system or transfer in. And that we're working very hard on developing programming that's intended to give parents the option to keep students in district. Good example is we're developing model specific learning disability pathways through OSS. And there'll be several schools, East Boston High, New Mission, Fenway, that will have those at the high school level because that's an area where we often see students leave in the ninth grade. So to your point, this is exactly our thinking as well. We know parents want the choice to stay. We know students do. It's up to us to build those programs where we see the biggest attrition out of the system. So that's a big piece. It was also true of Mel King, where we saw for several years they were the number one school sending students out, which led to us wanting to really help support a redesign there so that parents would choose them and students felt like they were getting the same quality education that they would get anywhere else.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Mr. Tron?
I'm sorry to jump in kind of late, but anyway, I just like to share my thought about bilingualism. Bilingual teachers who has the ability to speak the additional language may be sufficient to be a bilingual teacher, but in my mind, that certification doesn't really qualify the teacher as a bilingual, bicultural teacher, a bilingual teacher, a true bilingual teacher. I think I hope that the school will focus on making sure that those teachers are not only sufficient in that additional language, but also carry with them the sufficiency of the cultural knowledge of that language as well. Now with that said, I just have one last question. The budget, the revision or reimagined budget method right now is in response to the to the inflation, to all the increases and all that. The method of the budget method that we used before, the weighted student method, in comparison to this method, this new method, I'm of the opinion that the one that is used prior to this one, I understand that this one is used because of all this reduction, all this financial reduction and all these hardship. But in my mind, the weighted students formula is more equitable in relation to students with disability, bilingual students, and whatnot. So is there, or are we going to stay on this budget formula from this point on, or are we just on this because of we are dealing with the current climate, financial climate, and there may be sometimes down the road, I don't know, we may revisit the previous formula, or are we going to stay on this from this point on?
Thank you so much for that question, Member Tron. This formula is actually not related directly to our current financial situation, but has been the result of a 3-year planning process to develop a new formula. Because of some equity issues we felt like we had with the previous weighted student formula. So our plan is to implement this formula ongoing, but I think there is definitely room for feedback and continued development of the formula over the next several years.
Thank you. Maybe we should have a hybrid of formula.
Maybe, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for your presentation. And now we will move on to public comment. Ms. Parvex.
Thank you, Chair. I couldn't push the button. Thank you, Chair. This public comment period is reserved for individuals to address the school committee specifically regarding the fiscal year 2027 budget recommendation. Comments must be limited to the proposed fiscal year 27 budget. Please note that the general public comment period will take place during the general school committee meeting. We have 13 speakers this evening. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak, and I will remind you when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please feel free to email your comments for distribution to the committee. Speakers may not reassign their time to others. The time that an interpreter uses for English interpretation will not be deducted from a speaker's allotted time. Please direct your comments to the chair and refrain from addressing individual school committee members or district staff. Please note the comments of any public speaker do not represent the Boston Public Schools or the Boston School Committee. Please sign in with your registered name. When I call your name, raise your virtual hand and be ready to unmute and turn on your camera. Please begin by stating your name, affiliation, and where you live. Our first speakers are Councillor Culpepper, Corinne Kozlowski, Georgia Hollister Isman, and John Mudd. Councillor Culpepper is not in the meeting, so we will continue with Corinne Kozlowski. Please turn on your camera. You can start. We can't hear you. No, we can't hear you. Oh, okay. I think she left. So we will continue with Georgia Hollister Isman.
She's
She
here.
raised her hand.
Her hand is raised.
She's still.
She may need to log out and in to get to her
Yes.
sound.
Can you please log out? Maybe log out and try, and I will call you again, okay? Yeah, we can't hear you. So if you try logging out and back again, and I will call your name. Thank you. We will continue with Georgia Hollister Isman.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Georgia Hollister Isman. I'm a parent at the Chittick Elementary School. I have a first grader there. I'm a member of the Family Council and the Site Council as well. And I'm here today to talk about the way the district is budgeting for inclusion classrooms, and the staffing that is sort of like the baseline you talked about is the formulaic staffing for those rooms. Jeddick has long been an inclusion school and a successful one. It's something we're all very proud of. Our teachers nearly all hold dual certifications and have just, I have to tell you, amazing skills serving kids with a wide variety of needs. I will never forget the day I first visited the Chittick School and watched a K1 teacher simultaneously deal with a kid with pretty significant autism, provide reasonable direction to another child, and also explain to me about her pedagogy all at the same time. It was truly amazing. But as you have rolled out the new inclusion model, I'm definitely not here to complain about inclusion, but as you have rolled out the new model, we have gone from a situation at the Chittick where an inclusion classroom had 20 students, including 5 inclusion seats, staffed by 1 teacher and 1 paraprofessional. Even this is not totally adequate. I really think an inclusion classroom ought to be staffed by 2 teachers, but the situation we're in now is worse. Inclusion classrooms now have 22 students, 1 teacher, and only a half-time para. And the school has, and only then because the school has used its discretionary budget to maintain the paras at all. And even my first grader can do this math. This is less education and care for our kids, and it's having significant consequences. It's very hard for the school because of the decision you've made about requiring schools to cover.
Excuse me, please slow down.
Okay, thanks. Because of the decision y'all have made about requiring schools to cover the cost of the benefits and not just the salary itself for new positions, it's very hard for the school to use it, even its discretionary money, to hire new paras. Plus, we have lots of other things we need that money for, including ESL teachers, school psychologists, et cetera. It's having real consequences for our kids. We've had kids out in the class, out learning
30 seconds.
phonics in the hallway because the kid's having a hard time. I've had the teacher admit to me that she's not spending as much time reading with my kid or any of the kids as she normally does or would want to in first grade. We have longtime dedicated teachers who are sad and frustrated and thinking about quitting. It's really not okay. I think it's not what you want. It's not what I want. And I know the budget is tight and there are a million things that money needs to go to, but the staffing
Thank you.
system
Your time is up.
needs to change.
Thank you. Our next speaker is John Mudd.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You can start.
My name is John Mudd. I'm a resident of Cambridge, a longtime advocate in Boston, and grandfather of a student in the John F. Kennedy Elementary School. I'm going to try and make my comments relevant to the conversation that's happened earlier this evening. First, Boston is investing $128 million in education of multilingual learners. And the question is, are you getting the best results from that level of investment? And how are we using that money effectively? And I would say that the evidence is that we aren't, that we are failing to give the opportunity to learn to most of these multilingual learners. Over 90% are failing to meet state level MCAS standards. Many are not meeting academic English learning in the upper grades. So there's a real question. Some have raised the issue that we need to have a change of mindset about the value of home language and bilingual education, that we need to deal with the 90% now that are not getting dual language. Currently, 10% of the students are getting dual language programs. 90% are in classes where there is instruction in English only. And it is not effective. People have talked about the need to expand home language. I don't see that really it's significantly affected in this budget. You have a only an addition of 7 dual language or bilingual teachers and in dual language programs. I hear 6 classrooms. You're talking 120 to 140 students out of a population of 15,000 multilingual learners. What's happening to the rest of the 90%? The fact that we're recoding so-called bilingual teachers into English speaking teachers just reinforces the concern that the trend in Boston has been to move from language specific SEI and language specific SLIFE classes into English only gen ed classes with ESL. That has not been
30 seconds.
successful in the past, and it needs to be changed in the future. We need to invest that 128 million better. The same in spades means for the 4,000 special education students who are English learners. There's only 9.6 SPED bilingual teachers in the budget. They're all in English only classes, and over 95% are failing to meet MCAS standards. Please rethink
Thank
how
you,
we
Mr.
are
Mann.
using the resources we have.
Your
Thank
time
you.
is up. Thank you. Our next group of speakers will need Spanish interpretation. The speakers are Fatima Peña, Dora Sandoval, Denise Caraballo, and Kaira Amador. If we can have our Spanish interpreter support. Fatima Peña is the next speaker. Fátima Peña, por favor,
Fátima
acepte.
Peña, por favor, acepte. Oh.
Puede comenzar.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches, puede comenzar.
Ok. Buenas noches, Comité de las Escuelas Públicas de Boston. Mi nombre es Fátima Peña, vivo en la comunidad de Jamaica Plain y tengo un niño que asiste a la escuela pública de Boston, específicamente en la escuela Troller Elementary School. Actualmente estoy como padre mentor del...
Disculpe, ¿puede pausar para el intérprete? Gracias.
Ok.
Okay.
My name is Fatima Peña, and I live in the community of Jamaica Plain. And good afternoon to everybody. Good evening to the committee, to the school committee here. My name is Fatima Peña, like I said, and I live in the community of Jamaica Plain. And my child goes to a public school in Boston. And this question is specifically... puede continuar.
Ok. Hoy estoy aquí abogando por más escuelas bilingües porque la educación bilingüe no solo mejora el rendimiento académico, sino que también le da a nuestros hijos un sentido de pertenencia, lo cual fortalece su confianza, su orgullo y a la vez abre un futuro con más oportunidades para su desarrollo profesional. Nuestros niños merecen aprender. Sí.
¿Puedo interpretar ahora? Gracias. So I am here today specifically advocating for bilingual schools because not only because the increase of bilingual schools, it impacts the increase of better academic performance. It also gives the students a sense of belonging. It also strengthens their self-esteem and also in the community, and also gives them the opportunity so that they can have opportunities in the future. ¿Qué fue lo último que dijo?
Que nuestros niños merecen aprender sin importar su código postal.
And our children deserve to learn without caring of the zip code.
Por eso necesitamos más escuelas bilingües para apoyar el crecimiento y desarrollo de los niños en su idioma materno.
And this is why
Gracias.
we need... Oh, Puede seguir.
Okay. Gracias al programa de San Steven y a la oportunidad de estar en un salón de clase como madre mentor, me he dado cuenta de la gran necesidad que existe
ya voy
en
a
las
interpretar.
aulas con aquellos niños. Ok, con aquellos niños.
Okay, gracias. So this is why I am advocating for bilingual schools, because it also implements the growth and supports the development of students also in their home language. So also thank you to the St. Stephen program as a mother mentor in the classroom.
Con aquellos niños que no entienden el idioma y muchas veces se quedan rezagados simplemente porque no logran comprender lo que se les enseña en el aula.
And being in the classroom as a mother mentor, sometimes I have noticed of children who, because they don't understand the language that the instruction is given, then they're not participating because they don't understand.
Muchas gracias por la oportunidad. Invertir en la educación bilingüe es invertir en la dignidad, el talento y el futuro de nuestros niños. Muchas gracias por escuchar. Que pasen buenas noches.
And this is why I am advocating tonight. And thank you so much. And just know that investing in bilingual education is also investing in the talent and in the future of our children.
Muchas gracias, señora Peña. Our next speaker is Dora Sandoval.
Hello.
Puede comenzar.
Puede
Sí.
comenzar. Ujú.
Buenas noches. Mi nombre es Dora Sandoval y vivo en Roseberry. Soy madre de 3 niños que están en las escuelas públicas. Una de ellas tiene 25 años, el otro 17 y actualmente el pequeño 8.
Good night, everybody. My name is Dora Sandoval, and I live in the community of Roxbury. And also, I am the mother of 3 students. I have 3 students that currently go to Boston Public Schools. One of my students is 25 years old. Another student is 17 years old. And my youngest child is 8 years old.
El motivo por el cual digo el nombre de mis hijos es porque cuando llegué a este país, mi hija tenía 5 años, que empezó en kindergarten, y me la metieron a una escuela bilingüe, que fue la Summer en Roseberry.
And the reason why I mentioned my students' age is because when I first came to this country, one of my youngest daughter, she was 5 years old, and she was put in a school where she was attending in kindergarten, and it was a bilingual school.
Pero al siguiente año la cambiaron a una escuela regular.
And the following year, she was transferred to a regular school.
Después me moví frente a la escuela Hernández, donde apliqué para que me recibieran a mi hija, pero esto nunca sucedió.
Then after that, I moved to in front of the school Hernandez, and I applied for them to be able to receive my daughter, but this never happened.
So, el tercer niño, que actualmente tiene 17 años, él fue a la escuela en escuelas regulares porque tampoco nunca fue aceptado en un programa bilingüe.
And my third child, the one that I mentioned that is 17 years old, he also attended a regular school because he was also never accepted to a bilingual education school.
El tercer niño actualmente está en la Herley, donde es una escuela bilingüe que llevan inglés y español.
And my third student, he is actually attending the Hurley School, where he is attending in a bilingual program that is in Spanish and English.
Para mí ha sido una experiencia maravillosa que mi hijo esté en una escuela bilingüe porque veo la diferencia entre mis dos hijos mayores y el pequeño.
And for me, this has been a wonderful experience for him attending a bilingual school because I can truly tell the difference from him to my other oldest daughters that were not able to attend bilingual education school.
Pero tuve que esperar alrededor de 12 años para que yo tuviera el acceso a este programa. Y no me gustaría que las familias pasen lo mismo. Quisiera que hubiera más escuelas públicas de bilingües.
And for this to happen, I had to wait for 12 years in order to have, for my son to have access to this bilingual program. And I wouldn't want families to go through this. And this is why we need more access for bilingual schools, bilingual programming.
Sé que los programas se llevan su tiempo, pero yo he vivido 3 generaciones y veo el mismo problema.
And I know these programs take time, but I lived through 3 generations and I've noticed the same issues.
Sé que las escuelas públicas están haciendo lo que pueden, pero también hay algunos programas que trabajan independientes, como el programa que actualmente estoy yo, San Steven.
And I know that these are Boston, these are programs through the Boston Public Schools, and you do what you can, but there are also other programs that work independently, such as the St. Stephen program, which is the one that I'm part of.
Yo estoy trabajando como coordinadora, apoyando la educación de los niños como padre, y me siento muy contenta de participar en esto. Por eso pido que por favor nos incluyan en el presupuesto para este año 2026-2027.
And I am working as a coordinator, part of this program, supporting children, supporting our children. And this is why I believe that you should include this programming, this type of programming, and include us in the budget for the year 2027.
Nosotros los padres estamos haciendo nuestro trabajo y exigimos también que las escuelas públicas nos den los mismos servicios.
As parents, we are doing our job, and this is why we are requesting for the schools to continue to give these services.
Gracias por escucharme y que pasen feliz noche.
Thank you for listening to me and have a good night.
Muchas gracias. Next speaker is Denise Caraballo. Denise Caraballo. Puede comenzar.
Buenas noches al comité escolar. Mi nombre es Denise Caraballo. Soy madre de 3 niños. Uno de ellos va a la escuela Trotter School y soy parte de la comunidad de Roseberry.
Good evening, school committee. My name is Denise Caraballo, and I'm part of the Roxbury community. And I am the mother of 3 children, and they go to the school Trotter.
Y soy parte de la comunidad de Roxbury.
And I am part of the Roxbury community.
Mi experiencia dentro de la comunidad escolar ha sido profundamente positiva y transformadora. Gracias al programa Para Mentor de San Steven, he podido ser una parte activa en la escuela de mi hijo.
And my experience has been deeply transformative, and in being part of the program of Saint Stephen to be able to support my children's education.
He podido estar apoyándolo y participando en todo lo que fortalece nuestra comunidad educativa, ya que este programa me ha permitido conocer a otros padres, otras escuelas y sobre todo sentir que mi voz y mi presencia es importante.
And this is why it's been important for me to be able to support my children and other children, and it has been strengthening the community, the educational community, but also it has given me the opportunity to give to me, other parents, other educators, and this has given me a voice and a strength.
A través de Parementor aprendí cómo funciona el sistema escolar y cómo apoyar mejor a mi hijo como estudiante, pero más allá de eso, este programa me ha ayudado a crecer en mí misma.
And through this program, as a para mentor, I've been able to learn how schools work and also how to support my own son. And I have also had my own self-growth.
Gracias a este apoyo, logré convertirme en paraprofesional, algo que antes veía muy difícil o mejor dicho, casi imposible. Gracias a este logro, no solo representa un avance personal para mí, sino también un ejemplo para mis hijos.
And thanks to the support, I was able to become a paraprofessional, which is something that I never thought that I would be able to do or to become. And this has been a personal achievement for me. And also, this is an example also for my children.
Hoy me siento más segura, informada y con las herramientas necesarias para seguir apoyando a mis hijos en su desarrollo académico y emocional.
And now today I feel confident and also informed in how to support my children to also have the tools for them for their academic growth and success.
Por eso hoy estoy aquí para apoyar firmemente la petición de más escuelas bilingües para que nuestros hijos no pierdan su idioma nativo y puedan continuar desarrollando su identidad cultural mientras se reciben una educación de calidad.
And this is why I am here today to petition to continue keeping the bilingual programming because this not only supports students, right, but it also gives them the opportunity to continue to grow on their cultural identity, to not forget about their home language, and to also, ¿qué fue la última parte que dijo? Perdón.
Recibir una educación de calidad.
Oh, and to also receive a good quality of education.
Por eso les pido grandemente que pongan más fondos para el programa Parementor, porque cuando se invierte en las familias, se fortalece toda la comunidad escolar.
And this is why I'm requesting for more funding for the Paramentor programming, because when you invest in families, you also invest in the whole white school community.
Este programa Parementor de San Steven ayudará a más madres solteras como yo a seguir logrando sueños y metas y tener una mejor calidad de vida.
And this program, this Paramentor program at St. Stephen, is also going to continue to support single mothers like myself that will be able to achieve dreams, and also to have a better quality of life.
Gracias y buenas noches.
Thank you and have a good night.
Gracias. Our next speaker is Kaira Amador. Kaira Amador, por favor, acepte.
¿Me escuchan?
Sí, la escuchamos. Puede comenzar.
Sí. Ajá.
Buenas noches, miembro del comité escolar. Mi nombre es Kaira Amador.
Good night, members of the school committee. My name is Kaira Amador,
Soy madre, futura educadora en formación.
and I am a mother and a future educator.
Como muchas familias en nuestra ciudad, estoy criando a mi hija en un hogar bilingüe. Actualmente vivimos en Dorchester y hoy hablo desde mi experiencia personal y desde mi compromiso con la educación.
And tonight, just like many other families that I live in the Dorchester community and I raise my children in a bilingual home. And tonight I am speaking from my personal experience, but also committed to education.
Para muchos niños en la Boston Public School, el primer idioma que aprenden es el de su hogar. Cuando ese idioma no se apoya en la escuela, el niño puede sentirse inseguro, puede sentirse rechazado, pero cuando la escuela reconoce y valora ese idioma, el niño gana confianza.
And also, for many children, their first language is the one that they learn at home. So when that language is not being supported in their school, they might not feel supported, they might feel dismissed. But when the school supports also their home language and they have the programming, they will be able to feel safe and to also to have trust in themselves.
Como madre, quiero que mis hijos tengan un futuro con oportunidades reales. Como futura educadora, sé que la educación bilingüe no solo enseña dos idiomas, desarrolla habilidades cognitivas, pensamiento crítico y una mayor capacidad para resolver problemas.
And um, as a mother, it's important that our children have real opportunities. And as also as a future educator, I know that bilingual programming not only teaches students with the language, also with the support, but it also teaches them and grows their cognitive abilities, their problem solving abilities, and also
Pero mirando un poco más hacia el futuro, el bilingüismo también es una inversión para nuestra ciudad. Boston es una ciudad diversa y global. Necesitamos profesionales capacitados que puedan comunicarse en más de un idioma, educadores, trabajadores de la salud, servicios públicos y cuidadores, líderes comunitarios.
and it's not only about right now, but it's also looking towards the future, right? In investing not only in bilingualism, in programming, it's also investing in diversity. Boston is a city that is very diverse and is also investing in educators, caretakers, health providers, and also future leaders that are bilingual.
Las escuelas bilingües ayudan a formar personas preparadas para servir mejor a nuestras comunidades y responder a las necesidades reales de la ciudad.
And also the schools that have the support for bilingual educators and the programming, they're able to, it helps them to serve better and to also to respond better to the real issues that are facing in our communities and in our city.
Además, cuando una escuela es bilingüe, la familia pueden involucrarse más, la comunicación entre la escuela y el hogar mejora y eso fortalece el desarrollo académico y emocional de nuestros niños.
And moreover, when families are able to to be engaged in the school because of the bilingual programming, they're able also to have better communication, better relationships with the school, and also to develop also the students, not only academic, but also social and emotional abilities.
Invertir en las escuelas bilingües no es un gasto adicional, es una inversión a largo plazo. Como madre mentora que soy, que trabajo para la organización San Steven, puedo ver las dificultades que tienen nuestros niños en las escuelas que necesitan esa ayuda.
And investing in bilingual schools is not just an additional cost, but it's a long-term investment. And this is something that I see as a parent mentor, part of the St. Stephen program, that I see the real needs that our children have.
Nuestros niños no tienen que dejar su idioma atrás para avanzar. Su idioma puede ser la herramienta que les lleve más lejos. Muchas gracias y buenas noches.
And our kids don't have to leave behind their home language, but it can also be a tool, right, to help them advance and go even further in their future education. Thank you so much for your time.
Muchas gracias. Our next speaker, we're going to try again with Corinne Kozlowski. Corinne Kozlowski. Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Hey, okay. Not sure what happened there. Sorry.
No worries.
Okay. Good evening, members of the school committee. My name is Corinne. I live in Jamaica Plain. I'm a parent of two children, a first and a fourth grader with an IEP at the BTU pilot school. I'm here tonight to speak about two of the negative impacts that the proposed budget cuts will have on our school. First is the loss of our librarian. On October 6, 2021, the school committee approved the BPS Library Services Strategic Plan, which promised that every school would have access to a school library program by 2026. This promise was based on the idea that access to libraries is key to meeting the very standards set by the district in its high-quality student experience rubric. The four core components are rigorous and culturally affirming learning experiences, wellness and enrichment, a supportive network of caring adults, and physical spaces that support learning. I struggle to think of a single budget line item that so clearly and thoroughly achieves these goals more than a library, and yet the proposed budget for our school does not include a librarian. Second is our playground. The B2 pilot school sits on Walk Hill Street, which is a very busy street near Forest Hills T. The current layout of the play area requires students to leave the school premises and walk down Walk Hill to gain access to the basketball courts. This is incredibly unsafe for the teachers supervising our students, and it's unsafe for students who have on multiple occasions wandered from their class. In 2019, we attempted to use ESSER funds to rectify this. Our playground plan was approved in the early part of the process and then pulled without notice. Our school wasn't notified and the playground never came. Since then, we have had to get creative. Our family council applied for a Lowe's hometown grant. Our co-lead teachers collaborated with Madison Park School to rebuild our wasp-riddled barn. And last year, some of our parents worked with two neighborhood landscape architects to design a scope for the project in an attempt to access CPA funds to pay for this. This proposed budget all but guarantees that there will be no funds coming from the district to help us.
30 seconds.
Boston School Committee, I understand that the financial pressures we're facing are real, but we have tried in the past and are willing to try again to come to a solution. I cannot imagine that the best possible option that we have is to continue to take away programs and opportunities from students. If this continues, I'm afraid that enrollment will continue to decline and students will continue to miss out on important chances to grow and learn. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speakers are Yilmaris Matias, David Jean-Baptiste, Elizabeth Tonok Banua, Elizabeth Spring, Saran Still. Irmaris Matias.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Irmaris Matias, and I live in South End with my two kids. My son is a sophomore at the O'Brien Mathematics and Science School, as well as a former student of PPS, and lately I became a paraprofessional. To take in First of all, take in consideration the opinions that parents, students, and teachers have to make the right decisions about the school budgets. This is the reason that I'm here today, is to talk about the budget cut at the schools. I would like for you to take in consideration how important it is the school budgets at the school to give a good quality education. Keep it in mind, it is important, instead of taking away funds, to make use of the budget to provide programs that will help our English learners, special need kids, and get bilingual programs to get it properly done. Our youth needs the best education that we can provide. Having our youth to learn in their native language and will become beneficial for the future and for better job opportunities. It is important to have more schools that have bilingual education. Keep it in your brains and hearts, and not just talking about plans about bilingual education, but we also would like to see action, not empty promises. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is David Jean-Baptiste, who will need a interpretation, Haitian Creole interpretation. Mr. Jean-Baptiste.
Bonsoir, David Jean-Baptiste. C'est temps pour parler kounye la. Ou mettre commencer parler. David Jean-Baptiste, c'est temps pa pour bay témoignage.
Please unmute and turn on your camera.
Retire tête ou sous silence, li men caméra ou.
Oui.
Ok, ou met parler.
Ok. Non, Pam, c'est David Jean-Baptiste.
My name is David Jean-Baptiste.
Moi, saluer tout le monde qui est sous panel là, spécialement comité, hein.
And I want to greet everybody in the panel, especially the committee,
Pour gros travail qu'il y a à faire.
for this great work that you guys are doing.
Donc, moi-même, j'étais matin peine, moi-même, c'est un petit terre de deux petits moun qui dans l'école matin Antlan.
I live in Mattapan, and I am a tutor of two children who goes to Mattahunt.
Moi-même, tout, c'est conseiller tout à travers programme Conseil Parents Saint-Steven.
And I am also a counselor with the program St. Stephen's.
Je juste voulu pour petit temps, donc, pour me capable de parler un peu du programme Saint-Steven, qui c'est un programme qui permet présence nous dans l'éducation de moun petit chaque jour, pas seulement comme un petit thème, mais tout, c'est comme un monde qui accompagne ti moun yo.
I just wanted to take some time to talk a little bit about the program St. Stephen's, because it allows us to be part of the lives of the children, not only as a tutor, but also be in their lives.
Côté que nous supporter yo, grâce à programme Saint-Steven,
where we able
nous
to
apprendre yo qui gens qui pour yo travail main en main avec l'école là et pour aider élèves yo réussir.
Where we able to work with them with support of the school and teach them to work hand in hand with the school and support other kids.
Les titères ak fami yo impliqué ak ti moun yo senti yo pi supporté et yo senti yo gen plus valeur ak confiance dans tête yo quotidiennement.
When the tutor is helping with the children, collaborating, it gives the kids more value on themselves and they feel like they are well supported.
Moi, ouais, ça, chaque jour, comme un parent mentor dans l'école maternelle lan.
And I see this every day as a parent mentor at the School of Manahont.
Si moun yo ouais, gen parent qui kwe nan yo epi qui supporte yo nan apprentissage la.
The kids see that there are parents that believes in them and support them in their learning.
Ça permet que ti moun yo apprenne pi bien.
And that allows the kids to learn better.
Moi vle partager tout.
I want to also share.
Si poste solide mwen, pou mwen fè yon appel de continuité pou yo ta va kontinye gen plus l'école bilingue pour élève nou yo.
I want to offer my full support in there to be a continuity in more bilingual schools so more kids can be part of that.
Parce que bilingue lan, c'est yon force indéterminée pour ti moun yo capable apprendre pi bien nan langue racine yo, kote ke nou ka di nan langue maternelle yo.
Because bilingual is a strength and it is a force that allows the kids to be able to learn in their the native language.
Lè sa ti moun yo ap gen plus chance pou yo capable développer connaissance yo nan de langue yo.
That way the kids will have more opportunity to develop their language or their learning in both languages.
Et yo ap senti yo pi bien inclus nan sa ki yo ap apprendre nan de langue yo.
And they'll also feel more included in what they are learning in both languages.
Ma profite pou me dire tout, programme Saint-Yves dans la question de langue yo, pas seulement, c'est un patrimoine pour nous, parents mentors yo.
And I also want to say, take the opportunity to say the St. Stephen's program is also a benefit for the parent mentors as well.
Li kreyon impact sou famille mwen et dans l'autre famille.
It creates a big impact in my family and also in other families.
C'est peut-être ça.
That is why.
Moi ap suggéré.
I'd like to suggest.
Si nous mettez plus programme.
If you guys add more programs.
Parents mentor. Nous ba Saint-Yves plus moyen. Nan budget 2026-2027 là.
More parent mentor program and give St. Stephen's more opportunities in the budget of 2026-2027.
30 seconds.
Gen 30 secondes rete.
Ok, li ka continue supporter élèves yo et famille yo. Merci beaucoup.
It will continue to support the students as well as the families. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Elizabeth Tonogbanua.
Hello.
Hello, you can start.
Okay. Good evening, members of the school committee. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Tonogbanua. I live in Malden. I have taught ESL for almost 2 decades in Boston. I am multilingual and I've been part of many types of learning communities from K to 12. I have seen firsthand how programmatic cuts have harmed multilingual learners and students with IEPs. I am here tonight to address the proposed budget cuts for Charlestown High School, specifically as they pertain to our impactful co-teaching model, as well as our multilingual teachers of newcomers whose roles have been eliminated. One of the 4 core components that make up the BPS high-quality student experience is rigorous and culturally affirming learning experiences. To provide this experience in a way that fosters students' sense of belonging, which CHS does better than any other high school in Boston Public Schools, we must be able to continue building on the successes we have had with fully staffed inclusion classes. These cuts undermine our programs that have undermine our progress we have proudly made in the past 3 years. My co-teacher and I, for our sub-separate classes, spend countless hours together planning and preparing to support our multilingual learners who have specific learning disabilities. My co-teacher is an alumna of our school, and she affirms our students' cultures authentically, which allows them to see themselves through our HQIM. Through a translanguaging approach, we are able to dig deeper into our academic content, improve confidence, and validate students' cultural and linguistic identities. Through our targeted work, I have learned more about serving the students of Boston in the past 2 years than in the prior 20 combined. In turn, she's told me that I have taught her not only how to better support our students, but I've also instilled a new confidence in her. I've provided encouragement and trust in her abilities, which has been especially meaningful to her as she is a teacher with her own learning disability. CHS is stronger, and our students have benefited greatly from these meaningful partnerships. As part of our MTSS, it is critical to have skilled, compassionate humans tailoring and adjusting plans that build on students' assets in ways that couldn't exist
30 seconds.
if the co-teaching model gets dismantled. Boston School Committee, I urge you to rescind the cuts to allow for impactful co-teaching to continue at CHS. Our school has had a great many successes with this model and deserves to continue achieving in every possible way with this approach. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Elizabeth Spring. You can start.
Okay, great. My name's Elizabeth Spring. I'm a resident of the South End and an ABA strand specialist at the Curley K-8 school in Jamaica Plain. I'm here to urge you to reconsider the proposed budget cuts to Boston Public Schools, particularly the reductions that will disproportionately harm students with disabilities. These students are not an abstraction in a spreadsheet. They are children who rely on consistent services, trained staff, and stable learning environments to access the education they're legally and ethically entitled to receive. When budgets shrink, specialized services are often the first to be targeted for cuts. Across the district and specifically at the Curley, the decrease in ABA strand specialists and inclusion specialists will remove critical support for students to learn in their least restrictive environment. These positions were added to the Curley a few years ago and helped bring our school out of transformation by increasing classroom supports for educators and the amount of time students were included in their least restrictive environment. This past fall, both DESE and BPS celebrated the Curley for our efforts to come out of state transformation. A decrease in funding will greatly impact our ability to continue that work, and in some areas will reverse it. For students with disabilities, these supports are not optional enhancements. They're the very tools that make learning possible. Without them, IEPs become hollow promises. Boston is a city that prides itself on equity, yet these cuts risk targeting the very students who already face the greatest barriers, our students with disabilities, who are also disproportionately students of color, multilingual learners, and from low-income families. When we cut school funding, we widen inequities and the achievement gap. The long-term consequences are profound. Students who do not receive adequate support are more likely to experience academic failure, disengagement, and exclusionary discipline. Investigating in special education is not only our legal obligation under IDEA, it is a commitment to the dignity, potential, and the future of our children. I ask this committee to protect funding for special education services, preserve critical staff positions, and prioritize the needs of our most vulnerable students. A budget is a statement of values. Please ensure that Boston's values include equity, inclusion, and an opportunity for
30
every.
seconds.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our last speaker is Sarah Still. Good evening, you can start.
Good evening, members of the school committee. My name is Saran Still. I live in Dorchester, Massachusetts, and I am a paraeducator at the Melvin H. King School in the South End, one of the more affluent neighborhoods in Boston. Our school should reflect the strength, investment, and promise of this community. Instead, we are facing proposed budget cuts that will devastate our students, families, and staff. The current proposal would eliminate 46% of our staff and completely dismantle our elementary program. Let me be clear, these are not minor reductions or strategic adjustments. This is systemic dismantling. When nearly half of the school staff...
Please slow down for the interpreters.
I'm sorry. Okay. When half of the staff is removed, you are not trimming a budget. You are destabilizing a community. You are removing trusted adults, consistent relationships, and the very infrastructure that allows our most vulnerable students to succeed. The true cost of these cuts goes far beyond dollars. It is the cost of not fully understanding or not choosing to understand the work we do every single day. Our impact cannot always be captured by standardized test scores or attendance sheets. We do work that is preventative, relational, and life-changing. We de-escalate crises before they become emergencies. We prevent hospitalizations. We intervene so that the child can stay in schools rather than be in institutions. We support families who are in survival mode, navigating housing instability, trauma, economic hardships. We serve as connectors to resources and advocates and stay present in studying their chaos. When a student is in crisis, we are the ones sitting on the floor with them. When a family doesn't know where to turn, we are the ones picking up the phone. When a child wants to give up, we are the ones that tell them that they can do this. You may not always see this work in formal reports, but that does not mean it's not real. The absence of data does not equal the absence of impact. Too often it feels as though our work has simply not been valued because it does not fit neatly onto your spreadsheet. We do not want to be erased, rebranded, or quietly dissolved. We want our work to be named, defined, and respected. We are not a failure to be fixed. We are a resource to be strengthened. We want to continue the great work we're already doing with transparency, accountability, meaningful support from the district. We want investment, not elimination. We also want the district to recognize the value of keeping this work in-house, close to the communities we serve. Outsourcing and restructuring may look efficient on paper, but relationships cannot be contracted out. Trust cannot be rebranded. Community-centered work must remain noted in the community. The Melvin H. King School carries the name of a man whose legacy is grounded in equity, justice, and empowerment. I ask you to reflect deeply on
30
what it
seconds.
means to dismantle a school that bears his name. What does it say about your priorities? How would Melvin H. King feel about what is being done to his legacy in Boston? Tonight, I urge you to reconsider these cuts. See beyond the numbers. See the children whose futures are shaped by this work. See the families who rely on us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chair, that concludes public comment, and I want to thank all our interpreters who supported us.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Parvex. And I want to thank everyone who spoke tonight. Your input is critical as we consider the superintendent's budget recommendations for fiscal year 2027. I want to remind everyone that all budget documents are available online at bostonpublicschools.org/budget. You can email your comments to budget@bostonpublicschools.org, as well as to the school committee. If there's nothing further, I will entertain a motion to adjourn this budget hearing and immediately convene our regular school committee meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn the hearing?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Ms. Parvex, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Alkins,
Yes.
Mr. Peralta,
Yes.
Ms. Polanco Garcia,
Yes.
Ms. Garrett,
Yes.
Ms. Torres,
Yes.
Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
We adjourned the budget hearing.
Thank you. We'll move right into tonight's school committee meeting. We'll begin with the approval of minutes. I will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the February 4th, 2026 school committee meeting as presented. Is there a motion?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Hearing none, Ms. Parvex, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Dr. Alkins,
Yes.
Mr. Peralta,
Yes.
Ms. Polanco Garcia,
Yes.
Ms. Torres,
Yes.
Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Ms. Garrett,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
The minutes are approved.
Thank you. Before we continue, I want to let members know that the quarterly transportation on-time performance memo will be shared tomorrow and posted with tonight's meeting materials. At this time, we will receive a report on two tentative collective bargaining agreements between the Boston School Committee and the United Steelworkers Local 2936, also known as our bus monitors. Before I turn it over to Labor Relations Director Jeremiah Hassan, I'll invite Superintendent Skipper for remarks. I'd like to remind everyone to please speak at a slower pace to assist our interpreters. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chair. So the bargaining team for BPS is approximately 700 BPS bus monitors who are members, as Chair said, of the United Steelworkers Local 2936, reached a tentative 3-year agreement in late January, and following some minor revisions, signaled the final memorandum of understanding on Wednesday, February 4th. The union voted to ratify the agreement this past Saturday, February 7th. We are here to ask you as the committee to vote in favor of the agreement and request a supplemental appropriation of just over $1 million from the Boston City Council to support the contract through the end of FY26. The contract is a successor agreement that will extend through June 30th, 2028. The anticipated FY27 cost will be included in the revised budget we present to the committee in March. FY28 will be included in the budget presented to the school committee next year. The contract includes a wage increase, which is in line with our other collective bargaining agreements, as well as improved employee benefits and operational reforms. Director of BPS Office of Labor Relations, Jeremiah Hassan, will get into the specifics of the agreement in the presentation in a few minutes. Jeremiah and BPS Transportation Director Dan Rosengard are also available to answer any follow-up questions you may have. So at this time, I will turn it over to Jeremiah.
Superintendent, thank you very much. Chair Robinson, committee members, thank you for having me tonight. I am excited to present on behalf of the bargaining team and the bargaining team for our bus monitors union, the tentative agreement that the parties reached over the course of the last month. But it's been a long road to get here. We started bargaining in the spring. We went back and forth. I think both teams were really passionate about some issues, but we worked together to ultimately reach an agreement that we're both proud of. We're both fair. As Superintendent mentioned, the bus monitors ratified it on Saturday, and I hope we will do the same tonight. With that, let me share my screen and present the slides. So just a brief overview, as the superintendent mentioned, it's roughly 700 members of the unit. They're represented by the United Steelworkers, Local 2936. The agreement, it's a single agreement for 3 years, as superintendent mentioned, finalized on February 4th, 2026. The members ratified on the 7th, and we hope that you will ratify tonight on February 12th. The wage increases, it is 2% increases each year, plus an additional $1 increase for all monitors, effective January of 2026. And then in the third year, there's an additional 70 cents per hour added to the assigned monitors rate. So that's effective January of 2028. The total cost of the agreement over the 3-year span is $5,941,214. And as the superintendent pointed out, we are requesting a supplemental appropriation in the amount of $1,046,178 to cover the cost in FY26. The benefits and reforms that the superintendent mentioned, essentially they boil down to these 6 bullets. There's additional flexibility regarding the bus monitor's use of personal days and excused absences before school vacation. So what that means is if a bus monitor is required to be absent due to the death of a family, jury duty, or hospitalization, they will now be entitled to still get their vacation pay they won't lose out for not being present on work the day before or after vacation. They will also receive paid time for completing their incident reports. They have 15 minutes of paid time to complete that work after their shift. And we codified some seniority-based bidding processes that the monitors sought to really protect their most senior members in daily bidding. Operationally, we were able to secure some really favorable reforms that we think are going to be necessary and beneficial to our overall service of students. Specifically, we got 8 hours of additional required training that can be used throughout the year. This is important for us because if trends or habits are showing up amongst monitors, we now have the ability to offer mid-year training, where previously it was only before school started. We also were able to agree on a commitment to transition into electronic bid information, which will be both beneficial to the environment because we'll be printing a lot less paper, and beneficial to our transportation team because they no longer have to spend hours printing and organizing the bid packets. And then finally, we codified the parties' joint commitment regarding safety vest and ID cards. This is kind of codifying a practice that's been in place, but one that both parties recognized as important for students' safety and for just the general public to know who are bus monitors, and for schools to know when a bus monitor is coming into their campus. So that's the overall high-level view of the contract. As the superintendent mentioned, we worked hard to get this done with our union partners, and we both support this agreement and recommend that you vote in favor of it. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have at this time. I believe Dan Rosengard, who's representing transportation, is also on the call and available to really answer any in-depth operational questions you have.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Hassan, for the report. And thank you also to Dan Rosengard and the transformation team for their work on reaching these agreements. I will now open it up to the committee for questions and comments. Any questions, comments? Okay. Hearing none, thank you. And the committee looks forward to taking action on these items later this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And let me say, quick thank you to the Bus Monitors Union and their bargaining team. Like I mentioned, this was a long process. Both sides are passionate about their positions, but ultimately we were able to come together to get to a really fair agreement. So I think we appreciate their hard work and their dedication and their passion at the table.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Because we'll now move on to general public comment. Ms. Parvex.
Thank you, Chair. This public comment period is an opportunity for individuals to address the school committee on school-related issues. Questions on specific school matters are referred to the superintendent. Questions on policy matters may be discussed by the committee later. We have 4 speakers this evening for general public comment. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak, and I will remind you when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please feel free to email your comments for distribution to the committee. Please state your name, affiliation, and where you live before you begin, and sign in on Zoom using the name you registered for public comment, and be ready to unmute and turn on your camera when it's your turn to speak. Please raise your virtual hand when I call your name, and to support interpretation, please speak slowly and clearly. Our speakers are, we have only 2 speakers, John Mudd and Elizabeth Spring. John Mudd.
Good evening. You know me, I'm John Mudd, resident of Cambridge, and a grandfather of a child in John F. Kennedy Elementary School. I want to take a few minutes of time to try and talk with you about the structure of these meetings. I believe the school committee, the superintendent, and BPS as a whole could benefit from structuring its meetings to be more open to direct give and take with parents and the public. As it is, giving testimony in the air with no expectation of response from the committee is unsatisfactory for those who testify, to put it mildly. It often feels like speaking to a black hole which vacuums up everything that disappears into some never land. When I started my advocacy, I hate to say it, way back in the 1990s, under Mayor Menino, Superintendent Pezant, and Chair Liz Reilinger, and in subsequent administrations, there were budget hearings where there were public meetings where the public could ask questions and get immediate response from staff. Under the structure now, that kind of interchange is impossible. Only members can ask questions and get answers. What is even more troubling to me is that this practice of establishing protective barriers for the school committee from exposure to the public seems to be a pattern. There is even no in-person school committee meetings in the entire budget development process this year. The first hybrid meetings are where the public can appear directly before you are in April after the budget is approved. On facilities plans, you've heard many of us talk about the racial equity planning tool, which provides for consultation with the affected school committees in the development of plans. But your capital planning department process only calls for participation by the affected communities in the implementation of these plans. All of these practices in which the committee and BPS puts themselves in the position of making decisions without authentic participation of school communities in decision making breeds mistrust and cynicism. It is possible to do better. You can do better. I have long argued that you could develop some kind of process where there can be genuine dialogue and discussion on key policy issues. There could be oversight or town halls on critical issues where there is an open discussion among school committee members, experts, parents, community representatives, and advocates on critical issues. From the discussion earlier tonight, the whole issue of multilingual education would be benefited by such a discussion. BPS and most importantly, the students would be better for it. Policies could then have genuine, wide-ranging support that could improve student outcomes. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. Chair, that concludes public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Parvex. And thank you to those of you who spoke this evening and shared your perspective. Your testimony is important to us. Our first action item this evening is the grants for approval totaling $6,021. Now I'd like to turn it over to the superintendent for any final comments.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair. So there's two grants tonight for the committee's consideration totaling $6,000 and $6,021. The first is a New Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners Explore grant totaling $4,000. This school year, it serves 200 students at the Henry Grew Elementary School. The purpose of this grant is to provide Explore grants that improve library services, collections, and programs to support fluency building and reader engagement for our multilingual learners and students with disabilities. The second is an increase to a Mass STEP continuing competitive grant of $2,021 for a total of more than $384,000 this school year, serving 50 students in adult education. This grant will support ESL and job training for adult multilingual learners. We would ask the committee to please vote in favor of accepting these funds.
Great. Thank you. I'll now open it up to questions and comments from the committee.
I just quickly want to say that I'm very pleased to see that the Department of Education is supporting the English classes for the parents of our kids too, which is very important as we hear many times through the night. Educating a parent is also educating the kids in our schools. So I'm very pleased to see that.
Great. Any other comments? Okay, if there are no further questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve the grants as presented. Is there a motion? Is there a second? Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Ms. Parvex, will you please call the roll?
Thank you. Dr. Alkins?
Yes.
Mr. Peralta,
Yes.
Ms. Polanco Garcia,
Yes.
Ms. Torres,
Yes.
Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Ms. Garrett,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes,
The grants are approved.
thank you. Earlier in the meeting, we received the report on the bus monitors. The next action items are two related votes. One on a memorandum of agreement between the Boston School Committee and the United Steelworkers Local 2936, representing our bus monitors, and one on an fiscal year 26 supplemental appropriation request to the Boston City Council to support the cost of the agreements. I will now open the floor to the committee for any final questions or comments. Okay, thank you. Okay, the committee will take two separate votes, one on the agreement and one on the supplemental appropriation request. There's nothing further. I will now entertain a motion to approve the memorandum of agreement between the Boston School Committee and the United Steelworkers Local 2936, effective July 1, 2025 through June 30th, 2028, as presented. Is there a motion?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Ms. Pavets, will you please call the roll?
Thank you. Dr. Alkins,
Yes.
Mr. Peralta,
Yes.
Ms. Polanco Garcia,
Yes.
Ms. Torres,
Yes.
Mr. Tran,
Yes, with reservation.
Ms. Garrett,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
The motion is approved.
Thank you. Our last action item this evening is the fiscal year 26 supplemental appropriation request in the amount of $1,046,178 to support the memorandum of agreement or successor collective bargaining agreement between the Boston School Committee and the United Steelworkers Local 2936 as presented. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So
Thank you. And somebody seconded it? Okay.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Ms. Parvix, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Alkins,
Yes.
Mr. Peralta,
Yes.
Ms. Polanco Garcia,
Yes.
Ms. Torres,
Yes.
Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Ms. Garrett,
yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes,
The motion is approved.
thank you. The next remote budget hearing will take place on Wednesday, March 4th at 5:30 p.m., at which time the committee will receive a presentation focused on the central budget. Our final remote budget hearing will take place on Wednesday, March 18th at 5:30 p.m. prior to the school committee meeting. Is there any new business? Okay. All right. Hearing none, thank you. That concludes our business for this evening. If there's nothing further, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Hearing none, Ms. Parvix, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Alkins,
Yes.
Mr. Peralta,
Yes.
Ms. Polanco Garcia,
Yes. Good night.
Ms. Torres,
Yes.
Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Ms. Garrett,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
The meeting is adjourned.
Great. Thank you all. Good night. Happy Valentine's Day. Happy President's Day. Have a safe holiday weekend and week, vacation week.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good
Bye.
night, everybody.
Night, everyone.